In October 2008, a paper titled Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, was published, announcing the creation of one of the world's first cryptocurrencies. This paper was written by Satoshi Nakamoto, the inventor of Bitcoin. Nakamoto then created a message board called Bitcoin Talk and wrote, "I've developed a new open source P2P eCash system called Bitcoin. It's completely decentralized, with no central server or trusted parties, because everything is based on cryptographic proof instead of trust. Give it a try." Obviously, people did. But who is Satoshi Nakamoto? The short answer is no one knows. There's at least one real person behind this alias, because someone wrote the code for Bitcoin, published a paper about it, sent emails, and made forum posts about the new digital currency, but beyond that, Nakamoto's identity remains a mystery. Some think it's Elon Musk, though he's denied the rumor. An Australian computer scientist named Craig Wright claimed to be Nakamoto and was awarded copyrights on the original paper published on Bitcoin in its early code, although the validity of his claim has been called into question by many journalists and lawyers who have followed him through multiple court cases. There was even a Japanese-American physicist named Dorian Nakamoto, who many thought might be the elusive crypto god, but alas, he insists it wasn't him. Perhaps one of the reasons that Satoshi Nakamoto will never come forward is because they own about 25 billion in Bitcoin. Bitcoin that has never moved, and sometimes anonymity is the only way to feel safe. It makes sense that one of the largest contributors to the cryptocurrency world would want to remain completely hidden from the public. After all, anonymity is one of the biggest selling points of the entire invention. Cryptocurrency are digital currencies that verify and record transactions to a decentralized blockchain. A blockchain is essentially an immutable public ledger. Once transactions are completed, it is final and irreversible, and every person on Earth can view it for themselves, despite not having an identity tied to it. It offers a way to move money outside of central banks and financial institutions, giving people a perceived sense of freedom and safety in their financial lives. But the reality is that although anonymity can give a sense of safety to some people, it can also be extremely dangerous. The anonymity promised by cryptocurrency isn't only appealing to those who are skeptical of traditional financial institutions, it's also a useful tool for criminals, dangerous people who want to bypass banking systems and move money anonymously. Dealers and users buying and selling drugs and even darker illegal goods on the internet, while avoiding the watchful eye of law enforcement. This works because although all transactions are tracked and recorded, there's no personal information tying an individual to their crypto keys. It's just a random hash of numbers and letters, hardly representing any information at all. This has led to terrorists, people involved in human trafficking, and drug dealers to seize upon the technology for nefarious gains. The Silk Road, one of the most famous online drug markets on the dark web, used crypto for its transactions. The US Justice Department has also dismantled at least 3 terror finance campaigns that were soliciting cryptocurrency funds. The rise of cryptocurrency has fueled growth in global ransomware attacks, which have seen a 485% increase in recent years. In 2021, the FBI seized $2.3 million worth of crypto from the REvil ransomware group who hacked US security and IT management software provider Kaseya. Not only do these cyber hackers demand crypto as payment, but crypto makes their whole business possible. And it isn't just large companies that have to watch their back. Online crypto scams coercing people to invest in fraudulent crypto funds or fake cryptocurrencies are rampant. Last February, Satish Khambani of India, the founder of BitConnect, was indicted by the US Justice Department for creating and running a fraudulent cryptocurrency investment platform. The Monetary Authority of Singapore suspended a crypto coin illegally named after the world-famous South Korean boy band BTS. And after the success of Netflix's Korean hit Squid Game, scammers used the series' popularity to create fake crypto coins. The value of the coins skyrocketed 310,000% in just 11 days, which does sound appealing. The catch, though, is that this coin is what was known as a honeypot. Essentially, you were able to purchase it, but you weren't able to sell it. Because of this, you traded your dollars for this Squid Game coin, and the scammers escaped with millions in cash from unwitting investors, leaving them with a token that couldn't be sold and is literally worthless. Now, you might say, well, scams happen at all financial institutions, and you'd be right. But at least with many third-party backed institutions, you get protections that crypto just doesn't offer. If your regular credit card gets hacked, you'll usually get your money back since your bank or financial institution has consumer protections. With crypto, those protections don't exist. So when hackers get access to your private keys, or you get scammed into buying a fake coin, or you invest in a fraudulent exchange, once you give them your crypto, it's gone forever. In 2021, there was a reported $3.2 billion in crypto stolen, a 516% increase compared to the year before. And as new technologies involving crypto and blockchain technology become more popular, a new wave of crypto and NFT scams will inevitably rise. NFTs, or non-fungible tokens, are blockchain-based tokens that represent a unique asset like a piece of art, music, or other digital content that can be purchased with cryptocurrency. They're meant to give artists more control and freedom over their work, but we don't live in an ideal world, do we? Although NFTs were, in a sense, invented in 2014 with the creation of Ethereum, the real NFT revolution began to boom in 2021. With the help of artist Mike Winkelmann, also known as Beeple, his digital artwork Every Days, the first 5,000 days, sold for $69 million, and helped put NFTs on the map. Since then, artists and collectors at every scale have benefited from the creation of NFTs, but they've also experienced the same rampant scamming in all areas of the crypto world. A crypto investor who goes by Metacoven bought Beeple's NFT for $69 million in 2021 and also happens to be the owner of the world's now largest NFT fund, which studies data to provide analysis on various NFTs. Is $69 million a lot to pay for a digital piece of art? Yes, but what if it brings in far more than $69 million to your business? Some say that Metacoven's purchase of Beeple's NFT allowed him to drive up prices in his own NFT business. NFTs have, in a sense, become a game of who can tell the most believable lie. It was once reported that an NFT called CryptoPunk 9998 of a white-haired, green-eyed pixelated character sold for $532 million. It was set to be the most expensive NFT of all time, until it turned out that the buyer and the seller were the same person, creating a fake valuation for their own benefit. In the crypto world, since buyers and sellers remain fully anonymous on the blockchain, the wallets involved in the transaction are known, but who they're owned by is not. However, due to the open nature of cryptocurrency, anyone could check the chain and see for themselves that these two wallets had interacted in the past. If overestimating the value of digital art was the only problem, then maybe NFTs wouldn't have such a terrible rep. I mean, who even determines the worth of physical art anyway? Sadly, with NFTs, overestimation of value is just the beginning. NFTs are embroiled in more scams than you could possibly imagine. In February of 2022, a small but reputable NFT marketplace, Cent, had to suspend sales after rampant fraud was discovered on the platform. Its users were minting counterfeit digital assets despite the marketplace's best efforts to ban them. This is just one example of issues around the authenticity of crypto art, and reinforces one of the most popular sayings in crypto. Don't trust, verify. With an entirely public blockchain, you are entirely capable of checking every single transaction you make to ensure that what you're purchasing is coming from the original creator. Unfortunately, many seem to forget this crucial part of what makes cryptocurrency important. In another example, someone sold a fake Banksy NFT for over $300,000. One of the specifically dark sides of NFTs is that people who get into digital art for creative purposes are easily exploited. Enthusiasts communicate on apps like Discord, Twitter, and Instagram, but these same apps allow hackers to lure ignorant NFT aficionados into scams by using fake links that look like an opportunity to mint NFTs for cheap, get free airdrops, and much more. The targets are asked to invest their crypto into NFTs that won't ever be created, and then all of that money just disappears from their wallets, never to be seen again. Even Beeple's fans haven't escaped unscathed. In May 2022, scammers hacked Beeple's Twitter account and stole $438,000 worth of crypto and NFTs from his followers. They impersonated the artist, claiming to have launched a new line of digital art with Louis Vuitton, and posted a raffle for the fake collection in his Twitter bio. The hackers used a phishing scam, deceiving people into revealing sensitive information or unknowingly installing malware. Once they clicked the link in his bio, all the crypto and NFTs in their wallets were completely wiped out. The fragility of the crypto universe was clearly evident in the recent collapse of the cryptocurrency exchange FTX. FTX was the brainchild of Sam Bankman-Fried. He was the founder of the quantitative trading firm Alameda Research in 2017, and then FTX 2 years later. As the majority owner of both firms, there was initial concern over his conflict of interest, but he assured people that they were separate entities. Fortunately, that turned out to be a lie. Contrary to what Bankman-Fried said, FTX used its customers' money to fund risky bets made at Alameda. They would take customers' deposits, sell them on FTX to regular traders, and then use the cash to invest in other companies. To take it even further, these companies they invested in would often be forced to store their treasuries and accounts on FTX, where the funds could then be used again by Alameda, and the snowball continued to roll. On November 6, 2022, the world's largest crypto exchange Binance, which was also a leading angel investor in FTX, said it would unload hundreds of millions of FTX tokens. This was also around the time a leaked balance sheet came out showing that the majority of FTX's collateral was in their own FTX token. As you can imagine, if Binance were to sell hundreds of millions of this token, it would drive down the price and in turn drive down the value of the collateral that FTX held, collateral that was supposed to be customers' assets. An OTC or over-the-counter deal was offered by Alameda to purchase them at $22 a token. But this wasn't taken. The market called their bluff, and within 48 hours, FTX's token was down 93%. Days later, the US Securities and Exchange Commission and the Justice Department began investigating FTX, and on November 11th, Bankman-Fried resigned from both companies, and FTX filed for bankruptcy. In many ways, the FTX collapse seems like a traditional financial catastrophe, the kind we saw during the 2008 financial crisis, but crypto, with its promise of anonymity and its assurance of no go-betweens, makes the FTX disaster very different. Millions of dollars in FTX funds were stolen during the bankruptcy process. No one knows by whom. The collapse of FTX has led other crypto exchanges to tout their cash reserves and call for greater transparency because, even if you're not out there buying and trading crypto, you know it's had its fair share of pretty bad PR moments. And just a couple weeks ago, one of the largest banks backing crypto clients, Silvergate Capital, collapsed during the disastrous Silicon Valley bank run. Silvergate got into the game very early and was willing to work with many tech and crypto companies, which led to a $6 billion valuation in 2021. But as they say, oh, how the mighty have fallen. And the loss in value isn't the only narrative that needs damage control. As crypto has grown in popularity, especially amongst young people, environmental concerns around what it takes to sustain the industry have become widely discussed. In 2021, Cambridge University researchers calculated that Bitcoin mining was using more electricity than the entire country of Argentina. This huge carbon footprint of blockchain technology has alerted people, especially those who care about sustainability, to crypto's sizable contribution to climate change. However, the Cambridge Center for Alternative Finance estimates that Bitcoin uses just over 100 terawatt-hours of energy per year to facilitate transactions and keep the network running. In reality, this is actually less energy than what is used for gold mining in a year. In fact, the iron and steel industry uses over 10 times this amount of energy on an annualized basis. If Bitcoin was a country, in terms of energy usage, it would rank 32nd out of 59, tracked by the Cambridge Center. So yes, while Bitcoin mining does use quite a bit of energy, it is far from the biggest problem on this front. What effect this will have on the future of cryptocurrency depends on people's continued desire for the anonymity that crypto provides. The anonymity that allows you to transact back and forth anonymously with anyone is the same anonymity that allows criminals to run rampant and scammers to run off with millions. It's a double-edged sword. However, it's getting easier for investigators to track crypto exchanges by deciphering patterns in the blockchain. There's a small group of detectives who have begun tracing cryptocurrency crimes for law enforcement agencies, and a crypto tracing firm, Chainalysis, has emerged to find these patterns. They find groups of blockchain addresses that come from a single person or service, follow the money from those clusters, watch it move, and eventually figure out which exchange the money came from. In the US, crypto exchanges are legally required to retain identifying information about users under KYC rules, standing for Know Your Customer. So the promise of anonymity, the one that the entire argument of crypto hinges on in the first place, isn't always so certain. There are currencies on the market that appear to be more untraceable than their competitors. Monero, which has been adopted by dark web markets, claims to be untraceable. Zcash is another that gives even the best tracers trouble, leading many to fear it will provide safe harbor to criminals and people evading taxes. The question is, will law enforcement and other agencies be able to catch up as new blockchain tech is created? So far, they're not doing too badly. In 2021, criminal investigations by the IRS seized over $3.5 billion in cryptocurrency. There was a $56 million seizure by the Justice Department, and $2.3 million was seized from the ransomware group behind the Colonial Pipeline cyber attack. which alerted the American public to the real potential danger of these cyber criminals. Then in 2022, a New York-based couple was arrested for laundering money they'd stolen by allegedly hacking a large crypto exchange, Bitfinex. They had turned some of the money into the apparently untraceable Monero, but law enforcement apparently could trace it and found exchange accounts in their name. They found the private keys of a wallet holding over 100,000 Bitcoin and seized it, being worth about $3.6 billion at the time. To this day, it's not known if or how these addresses were tracked. However, one thing is certain, and it's that this was the largest cryptocurrency seizure in history. So while crypto has its positive aspects for those seeking complete control over their finances, its trustless and anonymous nature requires extreme caution, because the negatives can cut quite deep if you aren't careful. If you are going to get involved, be wary of scams, hold your own keys, and remember, don't trust, verify. Governments across the globe continue to look at how to regulate cryptocurrency before it gets too out of control by their measures. Unfortunately for them, bureaucracy tends to move very slowly, while technology, especially crypto, moves at breakneck speed. Technology can be amazing, but when the creators don't put measures in place to curb the potential negatives of their creations, we can be left in a pretty bad situation. Watch this video now to find out the biggest potential negative of ChatGPT that no one is talking about.
First, they sucked you in, stole your time, and got your undivided attention. And now they're coming for your wallet.
When did every fourth TikTok become like the home shopping network?
It's like everybody's a seller.
Just scrolling and watching ads over and over and over.
It's less funny people and more, hey guys,
please buy this product. Hi guys, you guys need this product.
Well, I can say to ordinary people that they should use TikTok with caution.
Recently, I've been getting constantly bombarded by TikTok shop ads. First, I thought they were harmless content from influencers talking about their favorite products, but the more that I watched, the more I realized that this was the opposite of harmless. I decided to dig deeper into this growing phenomenon, and what I discovered made me genuinely scared for the future of my generation. In September 2023, TikTok Shop was launched, and in just 1 year, it made over $11 billion. And it's only available in 8 countries.
I interviewed creators who were making upwards of like $20,000 a month. Because if you could get one video to go viral, then you're basically rich.
You're looking at a lot of purchases and purchasing habits that concern me because they're made instantaneously. I believe we're surrendering to technology.
How are they able to sell so much on a platform that was originally described as being a kids app? Will this feature kill the app, or will TikTok slowly take over the entire internet? This is how TikTok Shop brainwashes you to buy. But before we get ahead of ourselves, what exactly is TikTok Shop?
They just bluntly said, we're going to start shoving products into your social media experience.
Basically, it's what happens when you airdrop a bargain shopping app, think Amazon only in terms of quality, often more like Temu, on top of an existing social media app. And if that sounds messy, it is. What looks to be a harmless place filled with fun and cheap stuff is filled with empty promises, dangerous products, unethical business practices, and shady psychological tricks. Many shamelessly targeting underage users. And what's worse is that TikTok Shop's plan for world domination is just getting started. TikTok's rise has been nothing short of staggering. Debuting stateside in 2016, in just 2 years it became the single most downloaded app in the US. Its ability to attract and retain users by the million quickly became legendary. Of course, this didn't happen by accident. In a lawsuit filed in October, attorneys general from over a dozen US states, including New York and California, detail the ways in which they claim TikTok has carefully targeted its youngest and most vulnerable users. This is journalist Jamie Ding, who did an investigation into TikTok for the LA Times.
Some of the key issues that it centers on is, that TikTok promotes videos that use a lot of beauty filters that children can get addicted to. It promotes videos about body image, about weight loss, about beauty trends, and all of these things can really adversely harm children and teenagers' mental health.
According to the lawsuit, TikTok isn't only fully aware of its addictive nature, but has actively taken steps to develop and implement manipulative techniques designed to capture the eyeballs of what, in internal memos, one TikTok executive referred to as, quote, the golden audience, a term describing American teenagers and young adults. If you're watching this video right now, there's a decent chance that you're part of that golden audience. The truth is that TikTok can be very fun.
I think definitely what I like about TikTok is sort of the communal aspect of the content. For me, it knows that it just has to show me some cat videos that I'm hooked.
Now some might say, too fun. Firmly established as the world's most popular app, it has become an unbelievable time sink. Part of what makes TikTok so hard to put down is its so-called infinite scroll design. In social media's early and more primitive days, when you got to the bottom of a page, you got to the bottom of the page. There was a natural roadblock, a button you had to click to load more content. And not only did that speed bump cause a bit of friction in your experience, it also acted as a subtle reminder of how long you'd been staring at the screen and encouraged you to put the phone down, which is, unfortunately, the exact opposite of what our social media overlords want us to do. So in 2006, an interface designer named Asa Raskin solved this problem, and in doing so, unknowingly supercharged both the social media experience and its already highly addictive properties. I made an entire video about infinite scrolling tech if you want to check that out. But almost every single social media app now has an infinite scroll feature. What really sets TikTok apart is its proprietary algorithm. To understand how this algorithm works, we spoke with Savas Saneto, a researcher who took part in a multinational study which attempted to decode the secrets of TikTok's seductive algorithm.
We are pretty surprised actually by the granularity of the data. To be quite honest, I don't use it personally because I saw all the things that they collect from the backend. I can say to ordinary people that they should be well informed that the TikTok algorithm is designed in a way to increase their the time that they are on the platform. So they should be aware and may get addicted on the platform.
2 years ago, I made a video about TikTok tics, a hard to believe yet very real phenomenon in which a number of TikTok users who watched TikTokers with Tourette's syndrome developed Tourette's-like nervous tics themselves. This kind of compulsive and involuntary reaction, though mostly anecdotal, demonstrates that spending extended amounts of time on TikTok every day for weeks and even years can often allow the app to influence user behavior well beyond simply making them think it's a good idea to eat Tide Pods or lick ice cream in a store. TikTok has developed an eerie ability to figure out exactly what each individual user wants to watch.
I have definitely experienced the TikTok is reading my mind phenomenon. I think TikTok, like other platforms, is so good at kind of predicting what you're interested in. And I think a lot of people who are in similar demographics probably have similar content come their way. And so maybe your friend mentioned, oh, did you see this TikTok? And then the next day you see it because, TikTok knows that people like you are going to enjoy that content.
And despite how it may seem, sometimes TikTok isn't actually psychic. The secret, it's less about what you say you like and more about what actually holds your attention and keeps you coming back for more. To demonstrate this point, investigators from the Wall Street Journal set up 100 dummy accounts, complete with fake personalities and fake likes and dislikes, and then they used these fake personalities to consume TikTok content, measuring which videos the fake people scrolled past, which they lingered on, and most important of all, how long they watched each down to the second. The bottom line seems it's not about what you think you like or say you like, it's about what you can't bring yourself to look away from. And this, in a nutshell, is the TikTok algorithm's secret sauce. TikTok has perfected the science of keeping hundreds of millions of eyeballs glued to their phones and forever scrolling. That's no small feat, but in retrospect it's now becoming clear that that was only phase 1 of the master plan. And let's remind ourselves, because it's easy to forget, TikTok's core mission isn't to entertain you, and it certainly isn't to enlighten us either. Okay, the ferret's pretty awesome, but that's not the point. The point is that TikTok exists to make money. As New York Magazine journalist John Herman put it,
this is a platform and a company that will try almost anything. They sort of abandoned a lot of this idea that social media is about what people want to follow, about curating a feed, about sort of pulling together the effort of millions of people to sort of produce this alternative media. Instead, it's a system that sort of just runs tests on its users all the time. It'll say, maybe you want to watch this kind of video, let's try it, we'll show you more, or we'll show you less. That's sort of the fundamental premise of TikTok, which sounds kind of obvious, but it really, really changes what it means to kind of use your phone and to engage with social media. And they took the same approach with TikTok Shop, where they said, all right, we've got hundreds of millions of people using our app. What if we just threw products in there, right in the middle?
TikTok's original revenue stream, selling ads, generates roughly $18 billion every year. That's more than a respectable haul, but it's small potatoes compared to retail cash cows like Amazon, who routinely rake in over 10 times that amount. As a controversial Chinese-owned company facing a possible federal ban, more on that later, maybe executives at TikTok and ByteDance, the company that owns TikTok, are hedging their bets a bit, reasoning that if the temperature around TikTok gets too hot, American advertisers might take their advertising dollars elsewhere.
Advertising in social media is a fickle business. They looked at their competitors, they looked at Meta, they looked at Twitter, now X. They see the swings of this business, they understand how sensitive brands are, they know that you can't depend on this forever, the internet changes, whatever. One thing you can depend on is people buying stuff.
Or maybe TikTok simply realized that, as lucrative as it is helping other companies show their stuff, why settle for a piece of the pie when you can take your massive captive audience and sell them everything under the sun all by yourself?
I decided to write a story about TikTok Shop because I just noticed so many videos in my feed that were promoting products all of a sudden. I find myself frustrated because I don't necessarily want to be buying things, especially being like shoved in my face. I'd rather just consume my cat videos in peace. It's obvious when the shop tab popped up one day, but just almost like every other video was someone saying like, my cat loves her automatic feeder. A couple weeks later, it's like Korean lip gloss. Like I was getting coupon notifications, all that. So I thought, this is a really interesting phenomenon.
By all appearances, TikTok has made an all-in bet on TikTok Shop, and there's reason to suspect that they're thinking truly big.
Despite the strangeness of TikTok Shop, the way that it sort of intrudes on your feed, the weird products that are most visible there, the kind of gimmicky products, the viral products, underneath that, you've got a pretty big chunk of stuff that you can also find on Amazon, often a little bit cheaper on TikTok. So it's not just some ploy to like add shopping to social media. It's a pretty direct play into e-commerce.
Multiple Chinese retail sites already dwarf Amazon in the Asian marketplace. As unthinkable as it might have been just a couple of years ago, perhaps TikTok believes Amazon is ripe for a takedown here in North America. Yesterday's cutting-edge tech giant can quickly become tomorrow's stale boomer.com. Perhaps TikTok may be thinking a generation raised watching their parents turn Prime Day into an unofficial national holiday is ready for something younger and more fun that speaks to their sensibility. It's bound to happen sooner or later, and TikTok thinks they can be the ones to finally take the fight to Bezos in his home turf. After all, they are the people's champion. The biggest advantage TikTok has over competitors like Amazon and Temu are the salesmen that already have the trust of large audiences ready to buy their products.
What TikTok is doing is taking Chinese e-commerce and injecting it into one of the most successful social media apps in the world and showing it to people who otherwise might not have seen it. If you don't seek out Temu, if you're not on AliExpress, if you're not shopping on Shein, you're not aware that there's a world of products manufactured in China, shipped directly from China with cheap labor, often very little quality control, no transparency into the supply chain. But that's a huge growing part of the economy, and TikTok has just said, all right, let's just add it to our app.
Douyin, the Chinese version of TikTok, opened their shop in 2019. It currently generates a whopping $270 billion worth of business per year. For comparison's sake, that's only slightly less than half of Amazon's total annual sales in the US. With a sales model that depends heavily on the personal touch, this requires an army of shiny, happy young people parading in front of cameras to let viewers know why whatever product they're pushing that day is an absolute must-have. This has given rise to the notorious Chinese influencer factories. An estimated 30,000 people work as influencers on Douyin, and they're far from being the only Chinese retailer leaning into live sales. The sheer size of that workforce has created scenes like this, which, depending on your attitude, range from the surreal into the downright dystopian. Given TikTok Shop's rapid rise to prominence, the state of live selling in China might well be a sneak preview of what's to come everywhere else. Over 2/3 of Chinese consumers report making at least one livestream purchase last year alone. A number of American sports celebrities have even cashed in on the gold rush. Compared to Douyin, the US TikTok Shop has a lot of catching up to do, currently on track for sales around $20 billion per year. But that is pretty impressive for a very unique service that's barely a year old. By all appearances, it hasn't taken US users long to get in the swing of the live sales experience. Within 6 months of opening their virtual doors, ByteDance Corporate boasted that TikTok Shop is already the preferred platform for 5 million US businesses.
I think TikTok was definitely kind of betting that even though people might be annoyed at first, eventually they would just accept that this is just another aspect of their entertainment, of their TikTok experience.
And to be clear, that's not necessarily a bad thing.
The creator economy, which is definitely a buzzword these days, I mean, TikTok is at the forefront of it now. I interviewed a girl who launched an entire stationery business from TikTok, had a couple videos go viral. She was so successful, she dropped out of law school, she bought a house, and she has a brick and mortar shop. This is a real person, and she is so thankful to TikTok for bringing her to the audience who would buy her products.
Still, take a second to take a step back and think. The whole history of how human beings have bought and sold things is being totally upended almost overnight. Building atop what Amazon and other online retailers have already accomplished, and with so many conventional storefronts already closing down or teetering close to it, could TikTok Shop be the final death blow that relegates many, if not most, brick and mortar retail businesses to the dustbin of history? Main street malls, mom and pop stores. For them, is this really what extinction looks like? How and why has TikTok Shop taken off so quickly? It's easy to say that people love TikTok, so of course they'll buy stuff and they see it on the app. Do you remember the Instagram Shop? If your answer is no, then you're not alone. Launched with a huge push in 2020 and also timed to capitalize on the pandemic-era consumers stuck under virtual house arrest, Mark Zuckerberg's well-publicized pivot to online salesmen was quietly scrapped in March of last year. It's not like Zuckerberg was hurting for potential customers. Over 500 million people scroll through Instagram on any given day. So why is TikTok Shop taking off when the Instagram Shop fizzled out?
I think the TikTok Shop is sticking around for a couple of reasons. One is that TikTok is still, as far as a lot of people are concerned, like the top social media app. So they can afford to kind of push this if it means making more money in the long term, and that's what they're doing. The other reason is that it probably kind of works. People are buying stuff on TikTok, and a few years ago that sentence wouldn't have made a whole lot of sense. What they're buying is largely sort of cheaper stuff. A lot of it's direct from China. You don't quite know what you're getting, but it's like, a lot of it's also kind of fun or silly. You're not spending much, so you don't really care. And that kind of fits with the whole TikTok deal a little more than it does in a place like Instagram that people maybe associate with, fashion brands and advertising and premium, more expensive stuff. So it's kind of a natural fit in a way that it isn't for platforms like Instagram or Facebook or YouTube.
Anyone who's used TikTok since last year knows you don't need to look very hard to find TikTok Shop. Sellers are actively invading your feed with a less than subtle nudge from the algorithm, and although these unwanted intrusions are a turnoff to many TikTok users, the in-your-face nature of TikTok Shop has clearly been paying dividends.
I think in terms of manipulation tactics, you see that a lot more with live stream sellers in terms of they are trying to make it sort of an urgent issue for you to buy something. They're usually screaming at you being like, there's only 10 left, you have to order now, it's going. They're ringing a bell. Every time someone buys something, they say your name during the live stream.
I don't know why some of y'all not seeing them, but when I tell you it's a first come, first served basis, it is. Thank y'all for your orders. Listen to me, if you're a small or a medium, we only got 3 left in this. Now I'm gonna go switch to another thing.
But beyond simply putting sales front and center in a brazen fashion Instagram was unwilling to attempt, TikTok has one-upped competitors by taking a hard look at why over 30% of global internet users got hooked on TikTok in the first place, and then applying those lessons to TikTok Shop. Part of TikTok's core strength is that it's not Instagram. Instagram has a well-established social hierarchy. In some ways, it's like a giant Silicon Valley constructed replica of high school. There's the haves and the have-nots. the cool kids and the rest of us. With a Kardashian ideal of what beauty and success looks like, an airbrushed and Botoxed army of Kylie Jenner replicants act as so-called influencers for their millions of followers. And the rest of us, little people, are supposed to sit back, watch, and let ourselves be influenced. But TikTok's algorithm favors the little guy. Everyone is encouraged to get in the game. Anyone and anything can go viral as long as they're entertaining. Being and looking real is an asset for a new generation of TikTok content creators and consumers. Part of the secret of TikTok's success has always been the genuine relationship users have, or think they have, with TikTok celebrities. But what happens when people who look like they could be your neighbors suddenly start peppering you with sales pitches?
The experience of shopping on TikTok Shop is a lot more engaging than Amazon, Temu. You're getting a very personalized recommendation from a creator who is like relatable, making it fun. They're trying to present themselves as, just like you, I had a pimple on my head and then now it's gone.
Just as we all connected with a guy listening to Fleetwood Mac and skateboarding to work after his truck broke down, the most successful sellers on TikTok Shop know how to rely on the emotional appeal of their sales pitch. This was the core bait and switch in the transition from the original TikTok to the app in its current form. When we encounter some commercial mascots or Instagram influencers, we instinctively know the deal. They are only there to sell us something. But TikTok creators make for a new and far more insidious kind of salesperson. They make us let our guard down. They feel real because they are. Many TikTok Shop videos feel less like a hard sell and more like a savvy stranger sharing a helpful life hack. So, call us cynical, but why do we sometimes doubt the sincerity of these TikTok shopkeepers and all the endless products they claim to love? Jamie Ding theorizes that the specific nature of TikTok Shop's recommendations are a welcome relief for consumers, otherwise overwhelmed by the endless choices available through competing online retailers.
You have these websites with thousands and thousands of products and you're scrolling endlessly trying to decide which one is the best one. You're reading reviews, and TikTok really does not do that to you. It's usually there's one product linked in someone's videos, or like multiple people are recommending the same product. They're basically saying this is the best one and this is the one that you should buy. The only decision they have to make is press the purchase button. It's very straightforward. You click it, you buy it. It's just like a much more streamlined shopping experience.
There's no doubt that TikTok is doing everything in their power to boost the profile of users who are prepared to play the game. In fact, many formerly successful TikTokers have watched their engagement numbers plummet, specifically because they refuse to do business in the TikTok Shop. Meanwhile, researching an article, journalist John Herman discovered firsthand just how powerful a little push from the TikTok algorithm could be.
I know what it takes to set up a store on Amazon, and you have to jump through some hoops. You can do it; anyone can do it, but there are some checks, there are some barriers. There's a little bit of process. With TikTok, I was up and selling in like 20 minutes. I said, oh, I'll list some mechanical pencil. I'll be a mechanical pencil store. And I upload it, use AI supplied by TikTok to generate my descriptions, to spruce up the images I took with my phone. And as soon as I started, it felt like I was done. I was live in the store and they were telling me, hey, why don't you stream? Why don't you sell this thing?
To his surprise, during John's very first live stream, in which all he attempted to sell was a single used pencil, he was soon speaking to over 1,200 viewers.
It's funny, I'm a reporter, I've worked in media for a long time, I've been in front of big audiences, but something about TikTok throwing more than 1,000 people into my stream out of nowhere was still kind of shocking. It's just mainly I just didn't expect it. I was making this TikTok shop to sell one mechanical pencil like this one, kind of as an experiment, a little bit as a joke, just to see what happened. And the second I went live, TikTok started feeding me strangers. I mean, these are people who were commenting. These are people who are like, what is this? Who are you? And I was sort of caught off guard. And they're, it's sort of a strange window into the sort of power that TikTok has in general to pick someone, often just algorithmically, and to say, you're getting a lot of attention today. We're going to test this out and see if it sticks. So it was a weird window into TikTok's attention machine, and really a strange and unexpected one, because again, I'm selling something that has virtually no value, that no one was realistically going to want to order. And TikTok was still saying, sure, let's give you 1,000 people to test this out. That's how seriously they were taking TikTok Shop.
Not only does TikTok juice the algorithm to boost views for sellers, they've been known to throw extra weight behind creators who have agreed to sell whichever products TikTok is most motivated to move. TikTok also creates financial incentives in the form of bonuses. So, the next time you see someone swearing that they'd never leave the house without a spritz of their favorite perfume, ask yourself whether it's the smell of that scent they truly love or the smell of money. In some cases, those creators might be pocketing upwards of $5 for every unit they move. The business of selling things on TikTok has always been sketchy at best. From its earliest days, the app developed a reputation for blurring the line between content and advertising. Legally, social media ads need to be identified as such, but TikTok celebs have routinely neglected to use Federal Trade Commission required branded content labels, with TikTok itself more than happy to turn a blind eye. This practice continues to this day. Some social media management companies brazenly boast about their clients' clandestine, which is to say technically illegal, advertising reach. But now that TikTok creators can not only promote products but directly sell them, the gloves are truly off. There's even more incentive to indulge in ethically questionable, if not outright criminal, sales techniques. The most effective TikTok sellers understand that emotional appeals are the most effective, and the most profitable. In fact, a whole side industry has sprouted up to teach TikTok sellers not how to move merch with fun and effective pitches, but by preying on would-be buyers' deepest fears and darkest insecurities.
I mean, at base, a lot of marketing is psychological manipulation, and often quite nasty psychological manipulation. On TikTok, I do think you see a lot of creators who are sort of reaching for whatever they know will work, whatever they know influences people. And when you're selling something, that can get kind of dark. You can start appealing to body image issues. You can start, your celebration of beauty can easily shift into sort of a criticism of other people. What TikTok risks doing by injecting products into its ecosystem is sort of accentuating and exaggerating some of the worst traits that we see in social media influencing culture by really, really making it about selling, about the bottom line. It's enough that people can scroll through social media and feel bad about themselves based on what other people are doing, how they look, what they have. When those same people then turn to you and say, well, maybe if you buy this, you'll be more like me. Maybe if you buy this, you'll feel better about yourself.
This kind of predatory behavior is something we're used to with people like used car salesmen. But it's not something we've learned to expect when doing a harmless social media scroll. And it's not something that we should be prepared for, but that means we'll always have our guards up, which can't be healthy. And remember, millions of the TikTok users most vulnerable to these ploys aren't even old enough to own a credit card.
For kids, showing a lot of videos about or teenagers about weight loss, workouts, makeup tutorials. For someone who's developing, who could have self-esteem issues, teenagers, this kind of content can be very addicting and can lead them to spending hours on an app and damage their mental health. And so I think in TikTok's quest for eyeballs, I guess, these are the sorts of issues that it's encountering, and especially since children tend to not have as developed mental faculties. They're more susceptible to things that are addicting and give you that dopamine rush.
TikTok itself actively coaches creators on the most effective sales techniques. For their highest of high flyers, they even host on-site seminars for maximizing your sales at their fancy LA offices.
I have interviewed creators who have participated in those, and they say that there's someone on the TikTok side who's basically always available to answer their questions, that their accounts got approved very quickly, that they received all the resources and support they needed to start selling, versus they experienced a lot of issues trying to get on Amazon, and it took weeks, maybe months to get on Amazon if there were issues. That's all part of TikTok's strategy to court sellers, of course.
TikTok may not actively preach predatory sales techniques, but in encouraging content creators to become pitchmen, they are fundamentally changing what TikTok is.
I do think in the longer term, the risk for TikTok influencers and personalities in doing these kinds of sales is that while they make money and while a lot of their followers are happy to take their recommendations, eventually their relationship breaks down, it becomes transactional, it becomes about business, and the customers, the users, start to feel manipulated, used, and like TikTok isn't fun anymore. That TikTok is sort of squeezing them in a way that it wasn't before.
Effective TikTok merchants know that people are more apt to buy things from people they know and trust, and that's why so many prominent creators have become profitable sellers. But what if you don't have a recognizable face? In that case, it's always an option to borrow someone else's. One particularly devious and highly illegal way some TikTok retailers prey on unsuspecting shoppers is by utilizing face swap software. For example, to create what have become known as deepfake doctors.
The rise of deepfake influencers is interesting. It's something that I've seen on TikTok, where you'll get someone who is posing as a celebrity doctor or maybe an alternative medicine influencer, just shilling for some new product. TikTok offers a pretty good channel for that kind of scamming.
There's an abundance of health and weight loss products for sale in the TikTok shop, many of questionable effectiveness and even safety, seemingly receiving the seal of approval from trusted medical professionals with large online followings. As an FYI, if you come across a video of health guru Michael Mosley enthusiastically co-signing any medical treatments, as a buyer you should be aware, seeing as how Dr. Mosley passed away earlier this year. Both buying and selling things through TikTok Shop is a very different experience from shopping as we've previously known it, as writer John Herman learned when he set up his own experimental TikTok shop.
There was just no barrier to entry, and it was really clear that TikTok wanted to get as many people selling as quickly as they could. They wanted to make it incredibly easy to list products, to sell products, to start that process, even if that leaves a lot of vulnerability for people to abuse the system, for people to sell garbage, or for bad actors to sort of enter during this period of like huge growth.
For one thing, unlike say your local Apple store, which cultivates the illusion of opulence, elegance, and order, TikTok Shop often feels like a massive online flea market or garage sale. A bunch of poorly lit, here today, gone tomorrow strangers selling stuff of dubious authenticity, quality, and even safety. No one ever compared scrolling on Amazon to strolling down Rodeo Drive, but the more established .coms at least encourage you to read reviews from fellow human beings. On the other hand, TikTok Shop cultivates more of an every man for himself, buyer beware atmosphere. Are those impossibly cheap name brand earbuds authentic? What's really in those supposedly life-changing miracle herbal supplements? There's really only one way to find out. It's truly the Wild West of capitalism.
One of the things that really jumps out at you when you first shop on TikTok, or someone tells you to shop on TikTok, is that the prices are pretty low. They're not as low as they used to be, but they're still bargain basement, shockingly low prices. You might see a piece of electronics for $5, earbuds for $10, relatively like extensive set of cosmetics for $20, something like that.
In order for a large e-commerce platform like TikTok Shop to compete with someone like Amazon, it will need to increase the amount of products that's being sold on its platform. And I think in order to do that, you have to include, the Chinese companies who are selling cheaply made goods. My friend actually bought a Dutch oven from TikTok Shop, and it was from like a legitimate cookware brand, and it was verified seller, so it came in great quality. So you're really going to see a whole wide range of products on TikTok, from the crappy item made in China that is exactly like something you buy on Amazon, to like legitimate brands who are selling their items for hundreds of dollars. So there's a big range of stuff on TikTok Shop.
To sample the quality of some run-of-the-mill products you can easily find in TikTok Shop, our team made a few impulse buys of our own.
All right, so got a package from Mike over here from the TikTok Shop. Let's dive in. All right, cool. Yeah, he got me some oven mitts, so we're gonna check him out. Let's see, Geek Home is the brand. Never heard of it before. They say they're a premium kitchen brand promising a vision that strikes a balance between artistic freedom and functional excellence. All right, cool. Let's see what's in this. Alrighty, so these are the Geek Home oven mitts. I've never really seen oven mitts like these. Interesting, okay. So they feel like just gloves, I would say, like winter gloves or something. Normally I'm used to oven mitts being like actual mitts. Wait, what's going on here? Let's see. Cool. Yeah, these are interesting. So they look pretty cool. They're pretty comfortable, honestly. But what I'm curious to see is like, how are they gonna react to heat and high temperatures? Because that I'm a little bit more worried about, but we'll see what happens. Okay, I got the one glove on. Let's see if it can withstand the heat. Give it a shot, see if I'll burn my fingers off. So this has been in for like maybe half an hour. Don't mind the food, please. I just threw some on a pan. Okay, wow, it's heating up actually. I don't know how much longer I can hold this. This feels pretty uncomfortable. Oh wow, okay, yeah, no, that's hot, that's hot. I don't know, how long was that, like 15 seconds with these gloves? Not great. I've had better oven mitts where you can hold them for a little bit longer. Let me try that again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, that's getting too hot. That's uncomfortable now. So these gloves don't seem to be the best. They seem okay. Like if I was picking something up and just putting it down, it'd probably be fine. But I don't know if I would recommend them. They seem a little junky. I'd also say, I don't know how long they're gonna last either. They seem like they won't last very long. Let me try also, I'm just gonna put my hand on the barbecue, see how long that lasts. Just on the grate. Let's see what happens. Seem fine. Okay, I can put my hand on the grate, so that's not too bad. But yeah, you can feel the heat. Doesn't feel super comfortable. Yeah, that's all I got.
Hey, my name's Mike. I work here at Aperture, and to do some hands-on research for this video, I purchased this Sonic brand electric toothbrush from TikTok Shop. Obviously, that brand name, Sonic, is very intentionally similar to and easy to confuse with the better known and just flat out better Philips Sonic Care brand. Out of the box, there's not a ton of difference between the two. This one's a little bit smaller, but it looks pretty good. It actually comes with this attractive carrying case. But the differences between the two become obvious almost immediately. I bought two of these, one for me and one for my partner. The other one just wouldn't take a charge. After it stopped working the first time, the thing was done for. Now this one I have been able to recharge, and it does work, and it has a variety of settings. The problem is it kind of vibrates without moving. It doesn't really brush. And ultimately, the ability to brush my teeth is something I'm looking for from a toothbrush. It's just, it's lightweight, it's flimsy, it weighs probably about half as much as the real deal. Now, this one does cost more, but this one, if it works out of the box, it's not gonna work for long. Ultimately, you're just the middleman. This thing is gonna end up in a landfill. It's just a matter of how many months it takes until it gets there. It's just, I know you can't touch it. It's a flimsy product, and I think I can demonstrate what I'm talking about here.
As you can see, these products aren't really that great quality. Sure, they might be cheap, but what's the point in buying cheap products if they just end up in the trash? A core element of the appeal of TikTok Shop is often the insanely low prices, which makes the product seem like a good risk to take at the very least. Even if you suspect that a $50 50-inch Samsung TV might not be that great, the price makes it fun to roll the dice. Low cost is low risk. But at the risk of spoiling the fun, we had to ask, how are so many of the prices so low? Not only are many, if not most, of the cheapest products you'll find manufactured in China or elsewhere in Asia, a good number also mailed direct to consumers from the same country, and in many cases the very same factory, where they were made, a method of distribution known as dropshipping.
Yeah, dropshipping is definitely a dirty word these days. So most items, right, they come from the factory to some sort of warehouse. There's some sort of quality control involved. There's packing and shipping, and then it's mailed to the person who bought it. When it comes to drop shipping, it cuts out the middleman, and so your items are going straight from that factory to your door, which saves a lot of money. But it also means that, you know, sometimes the thing that you got doesn't really look like the picture, potentially.
In many cases, the only downside of drop shipping from the other side of the world might simply be the increased shipping times. But there's more to TikTok Shop bargain basement price tags than that. If certain prices you encounter in the TikTok Shop seem impossibly low, it's because, well, they are. In their bid to establish a foothold in retail markets around the world, TikTok is funneling millions, if not billions, of its profits from advertising income to subsidize the shop. In some cases, TikTok may be picking up more of the price for your latest makeup must-haves than you are.
This is probably one of the main things I was trying to look into. My article is how TikTok prices were so low. At the beginning, right, TikTok was competing with Amazon. They needed to be cheaper than Amazon. They needed to be more convenient. They knew that they weren't going to be able to compete in terms of the 2-day shipping. And so what they did was just flood their platform with coupons and pay for these coupons for whatever discount users are getting. And giving that to the merchant, and so the merchant, of course, was getting huge sales, and TikTok was paying them. At the beginning, to encourage like market adoption, I guess TikTok was probably spending lots of money.
TikTok is disgustingly profitable, meaning they can likely continue taking a haircut on the retail side for some time to come. You can bet the state of affairs won't last forever, though. The plan, presumably, is to undersell rivals until TikTok is able to lowball many of them, including who knows how many small businesses, permanently out of business. There will be plenty of time to jack the prices back up after clearing out the competition. When your MO is selling goods as cheap as humanly possible, you're going to need to cut all corners possible.
From personal experience, getting some direct from China goods like a jacket for my young daughter that a relative purchased that seemed to choke her when I zipped it up, usually it's just like, I kind of bought a piece of crap. But sometimes it's genuinely dangerous and scary.
Many of the leading TikTok-friendly brands also headline lists of companies with horrible ratings for both manufacturing and labor ethics. Although, thankfully, in some ways, the cliche of the Chinese sweatshop belongs somewhat to the past, to this day, the US Department of Labor maintains a lengthy list detailing a depressingly wide variety of products it alleges are often made using forced child labor. Cheap cotton garments, quirky toys, and cheap electronics powered by lithium batteries feature prominently on the list. Perhaps not coincidentally, the exact kind of goods TikTok Shop specializes in. Another reason why many luxury products are offered so cheap is because an astounding percentage of them aren't what they claim to be, and that's not even accounting for knockoff products designed to confuse buyers into thinking they're buying something that they're not. Now, although TikTok Shop officially prohibits selling counterfeit items, in their push to get as many sellers online as quickly as possible, it often seems like no one's really minding the store to keep sellers honest. If your name brand product somehow has the name brand misspelled, that's one thing. But if you're buying bogus skincare products, or even worse, pharmaceuticals and supplements, there is no telling what you're putting on or in your body. The sheer volume of bogus health and beauty goods flooding the US recently prompted both the US Border Patrol and the Department of Homeland Security to step up their inspections of TikTok Shop purchases, in the process uncovering products tainted with mercury or even arsenic. Perhaps you've heard a similar story about South Korean authorities who recently identified wildly elevated levels of dangerous chemicals in many Temu, Shein, and AliExpress products. Some particularly scary examples: formaldehyde, as in the post-mortem embalming solution, in Shein caps at double the local legal level, and lead in Temu sandals 12 times the legal limit. And even if we're not entirely sure what something called phthalates are, would probably steer clear of the Shein shoes, which clocked in at a staggering 240 times the mandated maximum level of those. To be clear, this particular South Korean study didn't analyze any products from the TikTok Shop, but based on the largely laissez-faire attitude towards quality control stemming straight from the top, it seems naive to assume no TikTok Shop products could pose comparable dangers.
I think there's real concern about the quality of goods and the safety of goods that you buy in a place like TikTok Shop. The fact that I was able to set up a storefront in a few minutes, go live, and sell something from my desk at home doesn't just suggest, but confirms that there is no front-end quality control, that there are clearly lots of ways around the suggestions and rules that a company like TikTok has. In general, direct from China e-commerce has sort of heightened the risk in buying things online. You have huge numbers of companies selling products with very little transparency into the supply chain. If something goes wrong, they can just kind of shut down and move on. They don't worry about their brands in the long term. They don't worry about American regulators particularly much.
Two particularly dangerous items which have been definitely linked to TikTok Shop. Would you believe do-it-yourself liposuction?
It in, and then you're gonna take that pinky and do this. This is how I do it.
Even though I've never done my arms, but this is how you would do it.
And even worse, a whole range of products aimed squarely at underage users. Black market vapes. The sale of tobacco products is officially prohibited on TikTok, and for that matter anywhere in the US for anyone under the age of 21. Yet as we all know, millions of high school and even middle school students have these things. TikTok Shop has been more than helpful in both glamorizing and accommodating that experimentation. Technically, you have to be 18 to use TikTok Shop, although mind you, the only system in place to enforce this policy is the honor system, which is even more bogus because you only need to be 13 to get on TikTok and get bombarded with ads for the shop. Really, the only thing stopping many minors from a reckless and potentially dangerous online shopping spree is getting their hands on their mom's credit card. To assist underage vapers who might otherwise have no access to e-cigarettes, an endless array of TikTok vendors deceptively list popular vape products as quote-unquote perfume kits or stationery, for example, to both evade the regulation by the app and to help teens conceal the actual nature of their purchases. These same shady retailers also use helpful hashtags like discreet packaging, guaranteeing that when an inconspicuous package arrives in an anonymous brown paper bag, parents will remain in the dark about what their kids are getting up to. Overconsumption is a real and ever-growing problem. This is Dr. Kristen Walker, a professor of marketing at Cal State Northridge.
The idea of spending on things that you don't need is not a new problem, but as the attention spans of this generation sort of start to reduce, I think they're making decisions that don't necessarily follow the typical consumer behavior decision. So typically you have a need, right? You have alternatives that you evaluate, you make that purchase, and then you have a post-purchase evaluation. A lot of the things that are done on social media are designed to be fast and quick. So it's cutting out or reducing the amount of time that you spend on evaluating alternatives.
Think about how much stuff most of us buy in a given year versus how much we genuinely require to live. There's an old saying, the purpose of advertising is to make people spend money that they don't have on products they don't need. Genuine necessities of life sell themselves. When you're thirsty, you don't need any convincing to get a cup of water. If you're naked or don't have shelter, no catchy slogans are required to convince you to cover up and protect yourself from the elements. So if you have a product to sell or you're an advertiser tasked with promoting that product, your job is to make something inessential seem like a must-have. Water will quench your thirst just fine, but are you sure you don't need electrolytes, whatever those are, and coconut water, and also maybe some antioxidants too? Let YouTube celebrity pro fighters Logan Paul and KSI throw all that stuff, plus a bunch of mystery ingredients behind a trendy looking label, and just like that, millions of young people are reaching into their pockets so they can reach for a delicious bottle of Prime. Take a look at the fast fashion phenomenon. 100 years ago, the average US woman owned a grand total of 9 outfits. For everything from formal events to time spent with sleeves rolled up out in the garden, those 9 outfits were all she had, and often she had to make sure those same 9 outfits lasted an awfully long time. High school home economics class taught generations of young women and future mothers how to sew and repair clothes in need of mending. Older children passed hand-me-downs to younger siblings, and it wasn't uncommon for more expensive garments like suits and wedding dresses to stay in family closets for generations. Fast forward to today, and astoundingly, the average adult woman in the UK purchases half her body weight in clothing every year and has twice as many half-forgotten items hanging unworn in her closet as her grandmother or great-grandmother owned in total. It didn't happen by accident. Increasing global wealth over the last century has afforded average shoppers a buying power their ancestors could have never imagined. Modern consumers simply have more disposable income at their disposal, not to mention dangerously easy access to credit. But there is more to it than that. As modern capitalism blossomed in the post-World War II era, the powers that be understood ever-growing economies require an army of consumers who will never stop spending. If you asked a farmer in the year 1900 to define his or her personal style, he or she would probably respond with a blank stare. But our choices in clothing are increasingly made less by function and far more by fashion.
Fast fashion is just another way of trendy, spending habits. It really offers young people a chance to be able to have that appearance, have that look that they might see on a runway at a much cheaper cost.
For many people these days, it's not enough to have a sense of personal style. One's carefully curated vibe needs to always be moving forward, lest one get left behind in the dust of ever-evolving fashion do's and don'ts. This fall, maybe you're feeling a Y2K vibe. But by spring, perhaps you'll have decided that cottagecore is more your speed. And while it's easy to pin the blame on young people, we're all products of our own environment, whereas baby boomers' parents might have at least given their 1980s mall kid offspring some side-eye for glorifying mindless shopping sprees. Gen Z has grown up in a world where overconsumption of all kinds has been totally normalized. In November 2011, outerwear brand Patagonia took out a memorable Black Friday ad in the New York Times. The ad was simply a picture of a Patagonia coat with the tagline, "Don't buy this jacket." While every other retailer in the nation was using every marketing trick in the book to make sure presents were piled high beneath the Christmas tree, Patagonia plainly stated some self-evident facts. Although brands take pains to conceal it, there's an environmental cost to each and every retail product. Harmful microplastics from polyester blends, toxic dyes, enormous expenditures of fossil fuels moving raw materials from farm to factory and then again from factory to warehouse to stores. As Patagonia put it, in order to save our planet, everyone needs to consume less, businesses need to make fewer things but of higher quality, and customers need to think twice before everything they buy. This was definitely an unorthodox marketing strategy 13 years ago, and needless to say it remains so today, but throughout the 20th century, even as the cult of consumerism grew, Patagonia wasn't the only brand name to cultivate a buy-it-for-life reputation. KitchenAid mixers, Weber grills, even the durable and ever-fashionable Doc Martens. But as time went on, publicly traded companies eager to keep shareholders happy have realized that no matter how many customers may swear by their brands, there's only so much money to be made from products that never need replacing. And that's why, over time, the buy-it-for-life corporate philosophy has been replaced by what is known as planned obsolescence. The concept first originated with car manufacturers who saw that by subtly changing the outside appearance of their cars, an upwardly mobile customer would be motivated to purchase new cars more frequently. The inner workings of the car or truck might remain essentially the same, but as long as the look kept evolving, status-conscious drivers would trade up every few years, if only to keep up with the Joneses. An identical game plan has been carried out by sneaker companies like Nike, who maintain basic shoe styles year after year, while offering new, must-have colorways with every passing season. See also rose gold iPhones, and so on. A more insidious form of planned obsolescence has infected the electronics industry, where manufacturers include components with intentionally limited lifespans inside their products, wagering, often correctly, that when their product inevitably fails in a few years' time, most consumers will opt to replace rather than seeking repairs. Just as women of older generations owned sewing kits and knew how to use them, at one time most men were expected to be able to perform basic fixes. But the demise of the classic old-school tool shed has been met by the rise of cheap, disposable everything, all available with an easy click of a button in the TikTok shop. A law has been proposed in California which would require convenient drop-off points for unwanted old clothes. Garments would then be recycled at the expense not of consumers but of the manufacturers and retailers who brought them to the market in the first place. The amount of textile waste, both from clothes themselves and the dyes and discarded materials that go into their production, has increased a staggering 1,000% since the 1960s. By now, most of us have gotten the message about plastic water bottles and aluminum soda cans. But while most of the materials in your clothes can be reused or recycled, most of last year's fashion will end up in a landfill, piled on top of whatever else was in style the year before that. This proposed law would be a step in the right direction, but it doesn't address the underlying reasons why so many young people have assumed a buy today, trash tomorrow mentality. Everyone has a theory about why so many young people spend the way they do. Usually it goes something like this. Members of Gen Z are deeply pessimistic about the financial future. Although the statistics on under 30-year-olds' current financial reality actually suggest they might be doing alright relative to earlier generations at the same age, there is a widespread perception that young people are inheriting an economy in seemingly inevitable decline. Whereas throughout the 20th century, there was an expectation that each generation would be wealthier than their parents, today's young adults are saddled with unmanageable college loans, unable to get a foothold on the corporate ladder, unable to move out of their childhood bedroom, and pessimistic about their chances of ever owning a home, starting a family, or retiring. According to this line of thinking, feeling powerless to make big financial moves, but with an abundance of cheap, yet attractive goods at their literal fingertips, many young people find escape in places like TikTok Shop, what with its endless infinite scroll and almost too easy frictionless buying experience. This is called doom spending.
Doom spending as a term might be new, but I don't think it's a new concept. Retail therapy has always been in existence, and, retail therapy, or doom spending if we want to call it, is a way of self-soothing. It's a way of dealing with uncertainty, just like overeating, over-drinking, over-consuming anything.
Here's how that works. As a young person, maybe you feel generally pessimistic about your long-term financial prospects. I get it. Then, on top of that, you spend hours online, which, as we all know, is a place where drama and bad news spread like wildfire. Feeling helpless and stressed when TikTok offers some brief relief in the form of a silly little trinket that tickles your fancy, you indulge yourself in a tiny little dopamine rush and click the buy now button. In a seeming paradox, there is anecdotal evidence suggesting that the less wealth many millennials and members of Gen Z possess, the more they spend on inessential goods. How does that work? If you own a house, that monthly mortgage payment comes before everything else. But if your first job out of college doesn't pay enough to let you move out of mom and dad's, you can at least take that entry-level salary, combined with little to no monthly overhead, and splurge on a designer handbag. If that's your situation, that's kind of understandable.
We're really talking about a generation that has grown up with social media for the most part, and the social media representations of life aren't always real. And if you start to aspire to have that kind of lifestyle, to have that kind of background, even on a Zoom, right? That's going to require, or may make you feel like it requires, purchasing things that you might not need.
The problem is many members of Gen Z are spending money they don't actually have. At a stage in their lives when, in past generations, we might have expected 20-somethings to be saving for a house or a wedding or a car, an astounding 97% of Gen Z living in US metropolitan areas are already in some kind of debt. And no, it's not all student loans. To put it simply, Gen Z is spending like there is no tomorrow because many of them seem to believe, between financial, political, and climate concerns, that there really is no tomorrow. At its core, TikTok provides an endless buffet of digital comfort food to a stressed out and sometimes hopeless generation. By understanding their core audience, and by integrating a shopping element that is cheap and seductively easy, TikTok has made a seamless transition from doom scrolling to doom spending. By this point, you might be asking, wait, wasn't TikTok getting banned? Is that still a thing? And as of now, the answer remains, maybe.
I do think it's easy for people to underrate the possibility that TikTok gets banned.
They're facing attacks from kind of all different directions. I don't know which one will be the one to bring them down.
Although a major power player in social media, legally TikTok is still on thin ice, at least in the States. It's currently illegal for government employees in 34 US states to have a TikTok account, and hearings on a blanket national ban for the rest of us are scheduled to begin in January. Why a ban? TikTok isn't owned by the Chinese government, as many incorrectly seem to believe, but there is a widespread fear that one of the prices of success in an authoritarian and autocratic country is giving the Chinese government access to whatever they want, whenever they want. And in this case, that could easily include the vast trove of data TikTok collects on users, not only in the app, but also wherever else users happen to wander on their phone. Critics insist TikTok must be banned because of threats it poses to national security. Others counter that while TikTok's user privacy practices are unacceptable, they're also not meaningfully different from those employed by US social media companies like Meta. According to this line of thinking, if the government won't corral user privacy regulations across the social media landscape, then singling out TikTok and its owner ByteDance is simply thinly disguised anti-China bias.
There's also the other Department of Justice lawsuit stating that they are violating child privacy laws by collecting information about people under 13. That could be an issue as well. All 14 lawsuits regarding mental health are going to carry on separately, even though they were filed at the same time. So yeah, a lot of exciting stuff coming up.
For what it's worth, 2/3 of Americans say they support an outright federal ban on TikTok. That 2/3 presumably doesn't include many 1/3 Americans who use the app regularly.
The algorithm we often talk about as an evil thing, but I think one of the reasons people love TikTok so much is because the algorithm also connects them with people who will like their content. They're finding maybe niche communities that would have never found them on another platform. It would have been much harder.
The battle lines have been drawn. Ban or no ban, we may never know what information TikTok has been collecting on each of us, or what Xi Jinping might want to do with it. But there's little doubt that TikTok has mastered the art of getting inside users' heads and figuring out what we like, what we don't, what tugs at our heartstrings, and what kind of rage bait makes us see red. Now that TikTok has transitioned from social media supernova to online superstore, what's next?
In terms of sheer volume, it's still so far away from Amazon. I mean, Amazon is huge, but Amazon is definitely seeing them as a threat. I do think that if TikTok were to hunker down and focus on TikTok, I think over time, like, who knows? And maybe they don't necessarily want to be a direct competitor to Amazon. TikTok, I think, can eventually grow to take a big chunk of the market away from Amazon, even if it's not up to that scale yet.
What might TikTok's final form look like? Is it possible that they could topple Facebook and Amazon and become Americans' #1 social media and online retailer in one fell swoop?
In China, there's a longer history of big tech companies kind of reaching into commerce and tech commerce companies reaching into other things. So I do think that they see themselves as like at the beginning of building a conglomerate, of building a truly large company that's involved in all sorts of different things. And that TikTok was just a start.
Will they successfully turn a generation of social media addicts into discount shopping addicts, saddling young adults with yet more mountains of needless debt? Will an epidemic of doom scrolling give way to a new epidemic of doom spending?
This is now, as far as I can see, for the foreseeable future, a social platform where you're going to be sold stuff, where you're expected to maybe buy stuff. And that does sort of change what it is. It changes what TikTok is. And how it feels. And I think that's a lasting change.
TikTok knows what we want, often better than we know it ourselves. And more with every passing day, it knows how we can be convinced to buy what we want inside the TikTok shop. TikTok is no longer just a source of entertainment for users around the world. It's also fast on its way to becoming the place they go to buy just about everything. And then, when that thing breaks or goes out of style, it heads to a landfill, place they come back to buy something else. Subscriptions are everywhere. Streaming services, software, groceries, even the heating in your car. Companies have convinced us that subscriptions will make our life easier, give us access to way more than we could afford if we had to pay out of pocket for everything. And sure, that might be true. But what they don't want you to know is the real damage that's been done by the subscription economy. This is how subscriptions are poisoning society. The subscription pricing model has gained tremendous levels of traction in the digital age. Almost anyone can hop into the online space, create something, and slap on a subscription fee, often in pursuit of easy, passive income. That's annoying, but not the primary concern of today's episode. Instead, we'd like to explore some shocking discoveries we've learned about subscriptions, and reveal an emerging trend that threatens the very essence of the internet as humanity's realm of discovery. And as we dive into the murky world of subscriptions, this episode also explores the powerful psychological tactics used by billion-dollar companies to create the perfect subscription loop. With information being heavily restricted by subscription paywalls, you'll learn the potential impacts that lie ahead of our society and what you can do to stall its effects. Let's hop into the time machine for a bit. How did we get here? A place where every single service and product under the sun requires a monthly fee. Well, subscriptions certainly aren't new, nor did they begin with Netflix or Spotify. Subscriptions have existed for centuries. Folks in the 1600s had their own share of the subscription craze. Now obviously this was just a matter of convenience. The newspapers realized that they could charge readers for weekly deliveries, and with no internet it was a no-brainer for most people. But with the rise of the digital age, things exploded. The early 2000s signaled what was to come, and we saw the rise of streaming platforms like Netflix, which originally started as a DVD rental by mail service, then slowly transitioned into streaming. Then came the next wave, music. We saw the rise of Spotify, Apple Music, and countless others. At that point, other industries began to perk up with keen attention, especially the software companies. Adobe was one of the biggest adopters, launching Adobe Creative Cloud in 2013, which shifted its products away from one-time purchases to a subscription-based model. Instead of paying once to own a product forever, you now need to pay monthly or yearly to access their tools. No options, no negotiations, and while you may not touch the new features, you're still subjected to the new order. Fast forward to today, and it's not just limited to software or entertainment anymore. Subscriptions have found their way into every corner of our lives. It's actually fascinating how many there are. Fitness apps, meditation apps, productivity tools, even car companies like BMW tried experimenting with subscriptions for heated seats in their luxury vehicles. Yes, heated seats. Now, let's dive into how these companies are able to keep you subscribed. This is where things start to get sneaky. Subscriptions rely on something psychologists call the sunk cost fallacy. Once you've paid for something, you're more likely to stick with it because you've already invested money, even if you're not using the service as much as you thought you would. Money and time are often the ultimate barter. It's a lot like how you're able to pay for a college degree knowing that you're unsatisfied with your major. But what if it's your third year and you've already invested so much? You might as well keep things pushing instead of leaving for the unknown. Now think about something as mundane in comparison to your college major, Netflix or Amazon Prime, an account for entertainment. It doesn't really seem like too much of a deal to leave the subscription active. How often do you renew the payment despite the months you weren't watching anything? It's not a coincidence that the sunk cost fallacy is so present. Subscription models are intentionally designed to create habit loops. They want you to incorporate their services into stuff like your daily routine, making them feel absolutely essential. For example, on Spotify, users get personalized playlists that feel like they know your tastes better than you do. Or on Netflix, the algorithm tends to recommend new shows the second you've completed a series. These tactics are designed to keep you glued to a platform or app and feel like an extension of your natural behaviors. It's like the service is doing all the thinking for you, and in an eerie way, they don't want you to be aware of them as a product. And then there's the free trial trick. Almost every subscription service in existence now offers a 7-day, 14-day, or 30-day free trial. It's a foot in the door. As a company with millions in investments, it's no-brainer to take the initial loss on the road to higher acquisitions. These companies know that signing up is a huge barrier to entry, a hassle even. Yet the allure of free supersedes convenience in our content-loving brains. And at the same time, the struggle of canceling a service, coupled with the fear of missing out on a new trendy show, digital tool, or album, creates another angle towards your inertia. Therefore, you're more likely to stick around longer than you initially intended. The key word here is inertia. Human beings are naturally averse to change, and once we get comfortable with services, despite when they aren't really adding value to our lives, it's extremely difficult to do away with them. The subscription model isn't just about keeping you in a loop, it's actually about survival for businesses too. You might have heard about Tupperware, a company that became famous for revolutionizing food storage. They've been around way longer than most of us on the channel have been alive. Hello, grandpas and grandmas. For decades, Tupperware was a household name, known for its high-quality plastic containers. Nevertheless, Tupperware's once glorious empire has crumbled with it filing for bankruptcy in 2024, mainly because it failed to adapt to new business models. Times change and the climate has to adapt. Just a decade ago, every business on Earth swore by their data-driven models for whatever it was. Nowadays, it's AI-powered, machine learning buzzwords. It's annoying, but in order to survive, you kinda have to get with the times. So, would Tupperware have survived if they chose a pretentious subscription-driven model? Perhaps. Maybe a subscription-based reusable container program for eco-conscious customers, or a smart Tupperware subscription connected to a mobile app that uses AI to track the freshness and availability of food in your home. I don't know. Seriously, anything can be a subscription. For most businesses, how shameless are you willing to be? For investors, how much are you willing to burn for the promise of an IPO? The idea of subscriptions also tie deeply into a concept called economies of scale. This is when a business gets so big, there's a negligible cost of producing a new unit of something. For example, Netflix has already spent millions producing and acquiring new content. The cash burn involved in adding a new subscriber is in many ways nothing, especially since the reward is a significant increase in profits down to the lowest tiered plan. The more subscribers they have, the better their profit margins, and this model is essentially gold for companies. It's the best way to get them guaranteed predictable revenue for months on end. With this model, businesses have little incentive to make their products better. Their main priority is to keep things good enough for you to look away when the charge hits your account. Think about it for a second. How many times have you seen a new update for a subscription service and it doesn't actually feel like an improvement? Probably a lot. At this point, hats off to the user interface and product designers of Earth. The steady paycheck from a brand chasing a new and improved look is keeping the lights on for some great people, so there is a little silver lining. A great example of this terrible practice, though, is the aforementioned Adobe. Prior to Creative Cloud, you could buy Photoshop for a couple $100. Nowadays, there's a $20 subscription per month for individual access. And sure, there's a 7-day free trial available and some student discounts, but the majority of users won't be enjoying those benefits for too long. Now, the price tag doesn't seem like much for some, but think about it. Over the span of 3 years, you'll be buying Adobe a PS5 with an Ultimate Edition of a AAA game, plus a new controller to wrap things up. Even worse, that's just from your pocket for Photoshop alone. Now imagine the plethora of talented artists or design agencies giving them down payments for a suite of tools that would have cost a one-time purchase just a decade ago. While Adobe offers a few tools for free, its signature products are locked behind subscription paywalls, making long-term use unnecessarily expensive. Seriously, I hate Adobe. Things get more alarming once you realize just how corrupt the system has gotten. Subscriptions are now in areas that would perplex the biggest tech hopefuls of the dot-com boom. Want to read an article on a reputable news site? Paywall. An app to compartmentalize ideas? Paywall. The very fabric of the internet and how we engage with it is at risk. Discovery, learning, and exploration were once key attributes of this space. It used to be a place where information flowed freely, and nowadays walls are going up, and information is locked behind subscription-based models. With such a subtle yet powerful shift, it's scary to imagine where things might end up. Information, especially on a vital scale, is becoming increasingly locked within a series of closed, fragmented platforms that are only open to those willing to pay. In the early days of the internet, there was a special type of excitement, one where typing a question into Google offered a treasure trove of information from people with unique ideas, perspectives, and philosophies. It was a wide open library where knowledge flowed freely. Early YouTube reflected that exploratory aura. Every week it felt like there was some new kid that brought a unique form of creativity to the internet. It was a templateless landscape. Now that idealistic era is slowly fading, and paywalls are looking like a guilty suspect. One of the most alarming issues with paywalls is how they're able to restrict access to knowledge and even productivity resources. Today, the aforementioned Microsoft 365 and Adobe have services that are heavily limited by paywalls. And although these services do offer some basic functionality for free or through limited free trials, their most popular tools and fully featured services like Photoshop or Word are subscription-based. Now keep in mind, these are the most popular tools for popular tasks like graphic design or office work. For college-level students and professionals looking to create custom designs or reports, the free versions really won't cut it. Now if you're a student or a low-income individual who wants to improve your situation by learning a skill, there's more holes in your pockets. Much of the news sources we visit are pretty questionable nowadays. The most prominent and influential media corporations we get our daily news from have subscriptions behind them. Are there free news outlets? Yeah, of course. But with a higher public trust and influence from bigger sources, it's embarrassing to witness the model being adopted at scale. We have the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, and more. A struggling schmuck doesn't even own these papers either. It's billionaires all the way around. Fact-checked verifiable information locked behind a monthly fee. That's cool, I guess. Where else can people get their news? That's where anyone on the internet is free to consume unverifiable info from the flood of free, disestablished sources. High quality and reliable information is now considered a luxury. And it's not like there's a huge elephant in the room that's proudly named profit. Every business has to provide value. Even so, when journalists are working primarily to keep the lights on, how sensational will they get? When content creators are presenting themselves as the news, how much do they make for virality over truth? The goal of everything these days is to keep people coming back for more. Aperture isn't immune. Close to a year ago, we made a video highlighting how Aperture is essentially boring compared to the numbers game landscape of today. It's not an easy job to create a brand and maintain integrity in today's landscape, yet having said that, it is possible to stay true to your philosophy without becoming an embarrassing caricature of your former self. There was a time when the internet was best described as the information superhighway, and that's because resources, data, and ideas could flow freely from person to person or site to site. Today it's like toll gates exist for every 2 miles. There's a problem with being limited to platforms you're subscribed to. If you're on Disney Plus, you're not consuming Netflix content and vice versa. The same thing is going on with news, research papers, and social media platforms that charge for premium features. Want to be the person at the top of X replies? Pay for X premium. It's all a vicious cycle. If creators, journalists, or independent developers want to be seen, their best bet is to join a platform with paid subscriptions. In the process, they might lose ownership of their work, sure, but if content is hidden behind paywalls, fewer people would see it anyway, forcing creators almost to rely on subscriptions a lot more. Let's talk about subscription fatigue. This is a term that's becoming more relevant as people grow weary of managing subscription fees. At first, these services were seen as a convenient and affordable option over purchasing individual items. But now there's way too many services demanding monthly payments, and it's kind of overwhelming. This is where subscription fatigue sets in. Feeling of being drained by a lot of recurring charges, and when they start to add up, you're paying for hundreds of dollars of things that you only ever use 10% of in a month. Think about it, one Netflix show is a speck in the entire library. As a die-hard Radiohead fan, you know you're not listening to anything else on Spotify, and yet these payments still feel like a need. Many subscriptions also don't offer clear or easy ways to cancel. With dark patterns or tricky interfaces and hidden menus, you're probably backtracking out of the labyrinth at the first sign of confusion. The worst companies tend to require users to call customer service to cancel. I hate them. Many people deal with gym memberships like Planet Fitness, where cancellations are an entire CIA operation for some users. For others, canceling a membership requires an Academy Award-winning A24 produced script. It could have all been so simple. What happened to the buttons? Premium features are another frustrating aspect of paywalls. On free platforms, there's a tendency for the best features to be reserved for those willing to pay extra. On YouTube, you can watch videos for free, except that YouTube Premium exists for when you'd rather not deal with a constant barrage of ads. That's kind of reasonable, but why would background play and offline downloads be limited to premium? It's like an artificial problem created entirely out of a need to profit from being annoying, and yet it's effective. This pay-to-play model is affecting creators as well. Social media platforms now offer creators an option to hide their best content behind paywalls. On Instagram, there's an exclusive content feature where fans are able to pay for subscriber-only posts. Similarly, YouTube has members. And while this offers a way to make money, there's also limited reach to their content, and this contributes to the overall fragmentation of the internet. It's also impossible to ignore the constant upselling that goes on. After you've subscribed to a service, you're constantly pushed into a higher tier. First you're on the basic tier, and then you're bombarded with offers for premium or pro options. Nowadays, YouTube Premium is pitching a higher bitrate version of 1080p exclusively to its paying users. On DoorDash, its Dash Pass offers you free deliveries and exclusive deals. Cool, but the best bang for your buck is actually staring right in your face, and it's an empty pantry. These systems are primarily designed to squeeze money out of you, and they're pretty shameless about it. Interestingly enough, once you're where they want you to be, it's like they disappear. Prior to using Spotify Premium, every 5 business days there was a new email offering 3 months of premium for the small price of your banking details. And now that you're in, they're hiding. They don't want to be seen or remembered as a business in your inbox. Their only aim is to exist as an obscure charge to your bank account. While the internet once thrived on creativity and user-centric design in its early days, it's moved from a place where the best experiences were created for users to a commercialized space. Priorities have shifted fully. Instead of making it a better place for users, companies are laser-focused on maximizing profits at all costs. This shift is sometimes referred to as an enshittification, a term coined by tech critic and writer Cory Doctorow. It describes how platforms over time tend to degrade in quality for the average user. This happens because companies, in the pursuit of higher profit, slowly but surely tend to make the experience much worse. Things get more frustrating and manipulative. At the heart of this behavior, you'll find companies that offer subscription services. Businesses lock more features behind paywalls or introduce new and convoluted ways to keep users paying without offering any extra value. It's getting much worse, and we're suffering for it. The entire tech industry serves as the backbone of the internet, and many monopolies exist across the board. These companies have one top priority, and it's not the users. It's down to the investors and advertisers. Here's a quick dive into how tech companies work nowadays. First, some ambitious teen meets with a Peter Thiel or Elon Musk type venture capitalist, and the kid is marketable for Silicon Valley. The next, Zuckerberg, even. A few $1 million are invested into the idea, and some high-profile connections are tapped, and interviews with major platforms like CNBC are arranged. Maybe a Forbes article? Definitely worth throwing in for good measure. As the hype snowballs, demand grows, and more money is poured into marketing and expansion. Influencers and content creators swear it's the next big thing, and they're probably sounding super convincing. For the most marketable and popular apps, the expansion feels endless. New regions are unlocked, new users are hooked, and every potential corner of the market is tapped, but by now the millions of dollars have been sunk into this venture, and the company might not have even made a single cent of profit. The goal isn't immediate returns, it's growth, and with this burning pile of cash, competition is easily outpaced either by being bought out or squashed. So why does this have to happen? For venture capitalists and investors, the play is simple. Grow the company, dominate the market, and aim for the promised land of going public. Inflate the company's valuation and get those shares sold and make a killing. The actual success of the business is somebody else's problem. The examples of subscription-based companies that follow this template are endless, but we've seen many over the years. Another success besides Spotify and Netflix is Dropbox, a file hosting service. Meanwhile, we've seen the failure of companies like WeWork, a startup with millions in investment that promise subscription-based co-working spaces and communal living. There's also the short-lived, short-form streaming platform Quibi, and the ambitious $300 million news subscription product from CNN+, which was shut down just a month after its launch. Launching a business and getting investments is by no means a bad idea, but here's the issue. The internet of today is so profit-focused that it's difficult to imagine any genuine innovation without money involved. Investors are extremely short-sighted, and company founders need money to keep the lights on. Nobody wants to take on heavy risks, it's just not the subscription models that are dealing with this. You'll find it in every industry. For example, when Marvel was set to explore some new creative directions for its Marvel Cinematic Universe, it began to struggle. What was the solution? Bring back tried and tested successes like Robert Downey Jr. and the Russo brothers. Does your voice matter to internet companies? Not really, no. Sure, there's campaigns and moments where they leave encouraging comments on TikToks and send goodies to a few fans once in a while, as long as the cameras are rolling. The regular day-to-day customer doesn't really get that sort of special treatment though. One example of the internet's degradation is in customer support. As companies continue to expand their subscription models, there's little effort or care being expressed for the actual customer. Take a quick look at major platforms like Amazon, Netflix, Adobe, and Spotify. Even EA, a gaming company. Yes, Electronic Arts, the bane of every gamer's existence. We've seen countless moments where the company's customer support has been very unhelpful, especially in relation to hacks and account linking. Despite this, they are notorious for their highly criticized subscriptions from battle passes in games like Apex Legends and Battlefield 2042. Now, when dealing with customer support from popular companies, you'd expect that their billions of dollars will afford them the best support specialists, right? The answer to that is a resounding no. You're going to be funneled into an endless loop of chatbots, automated phone systems, and outsourced customer support teams with no context about your issue. Many companies will pass you between departments, or worse, between machines. This constant back and forth leaves users frustrated and without a real solution to their issue. It's all thanks to a race to cut costs and maximize revenue. Companies have now fully outsourced their support systems, and some have replaced them entirely with AI-powered bots. It's efficient for their bottom line, but paying customers are often left with subpar experiences, especially when dealing with hefty monthly fees and redundant updates. Support just isn't what it used to be. It's now another victim of the enshittification process, where profit comes before user experience. Platform silos are already a growing problem with the internet. With the dominance of platforms like Amazon, we're witnessing tightly controlled ecosystems where you're only presented with content that fits your subscription needs. With the dominance of platforms like Amazon, we're witnessing tightly controlled ecosystems where you're only presented with content that fits your subscription package. Amazon Prime is a prime example. With a subscription, there's no need to engage with new storefronts or platforms. Instead, you have access to tons of benefits that will keep you engaged. Meanwhile, Amazon is burning through piles of cash to keep you on Prime. It has Twitch, which as a platform is literally unprofitable. The cost of running the servers and other charges makes it a bust for most organizations. For Amazon, it's a marketing tool that's worth its weight in popularity and influence. Twitch Prime is an important part of the web of control, and it needs subscribers to feel a lot like this stuff is free, although users are actually paying. Other platforms have tried using the Twitch method for years. We saw Mixer, Facebook Gaming, and YouTube Live attempting to put up a decent fight. Amazon just has way more to gain from the success of Twitch, especially with the relevance of Amazon Web Services subsidiary, which powers the platform. So if you're a live streamer with unconventional ideas that don't fit into the mold of Twitch, where do you go? Find an alternative platform most likely, but that's not really easy either. New platforms usually come with a fair share of restrictive rules, and users are going to be unwilling to leave, especially with existing subscriptions. These monopolistic practices stifle discovery and innovation, creating an internet where a select few platforms are able to dictate what most people can see, share, and engage with. Our current shift towards enshittification means that users are no longer a priority on the internet. Instead, users have become the product, and they are milked for every penny possible. Subscription fees, upselling tactics, and data-driven marketing strategies are the new keys to success. What's worse is that companies can't attempt to go back to the way things used to be. Everywhere is cutthroat, and if you show a sign of slowing down with the acquisition meta, you're going to lose big. To illustrate how brutal and profit-focused the space has become, let's take a look at Blizzard Entertainment, the publishers behind World of Warcraft and Overwatch. In 2010, during the release of its StarCraft 2, a game that took years of development and millions of dollars in resources, Blizzard brought in a surprising amount of money from it, but not as much as you might think. Despite StarCraft 2's high budget and passionate fanbase, Blizzard actually made more from selling a $15 in-game horse in World of Warcraft than the entire revenue of StarCraft 2 at launch. Imagine for a second, as a lover of artistic integrity and value, the losses are probably worth it in exchange for a profound gaming experience. To investors, though, you're nothing but a joker. After witnessing that sort of market for microtransactions, the gaming industry has only continued to hammer on live subscription models and cosmetics. Companies tend to milk the things that can bring in frequent revenue. To them, investing in long-term user-focused innovation is a waste of time. With that shift, the user inevitably suffers, and we can see that in the current state of many industries. Popular and successful on the outside, but on the inside, millions of dollars are burned to make more money. A money trail that tells no stories, helps no lives, and inspires nobody, leading back to the emptiness it all began with. Subscriptions, for all their conveniences, pose an uncomfortable irony in which we criticize them. Yet we actively participate in the system and continue to perpetuate its existence. From streaming services to software, the people who criticize the subscription trap are often those who sign up for multiple monthly subscription plans. So how is it that we can beat the exploitative model when they thrive precisely because we buy into it? Take a moment to consider how people justify their subscriptions. You'll often hear, "I hate how everything has a monthly fee now," and yet we eagerly sign up for Amazon Prime or Netflix. These services thrive not just because the companies push them, but also because we've convinced ourselves that they're really necessary. Which is kind of what they want. This moral dilemma arises from the reality that for many people, these subscriptions provide some legitimate value. The real tension exists in the fact that we know we're being taken advantage of in some ways. We've got auto renewals, upselling price hikes, and more. We also feel dependent on these services. They're so embedded in our daily lives that canceling feels more of a burden to tolerating the financial drain. It's a cycle of reliance. Companies are aware that they've built something we can't easily live without, and that's why the subscription model works so well. It's a trap, but it's a trap we walk into willingly. Things get murkier when we look at how some people navigate the subscription fatigue, through piracy. In many ways, the people who oppose subscriptions turn to piracy as a way to avoid paying content they feel should be freely available, or priced better. From movies to video games to music, entire industries have been impacted by piracy. This has quickly elevated its status as a gray market response to digital monopolies and walled-off content. Yet, piracy presents its own set of moral dilemmas. On one hand, it feels like a solid way to fight against what many see as pure corporate greed. Why pay a subscription fee for content that used to be free or at least more accessible? On the other hand, piracy often takes revenue away from much smaller creators who rely on the very platforms that people want to avoid. In the context of movies, independent films, or indie games, pirating hurts the very people who are struggling under the weight of a subscription-based ecosystem run by major corporations. The dilemma is clear. By pirating, You probably feel like you're rejecting an unfair system, but you could be harming creators who are just trying to make a living. Piracy, therefore, isn't a solution, but rather a symptom of frustration from living in a subscription-based society. Is your win worth a loss for many others? It's important to recognize that not every company or creator is rolling in profits thanks to their subscription models. Many of them are actually trapped in the same system they uphold. For some businesses, offering a subscription is no longer a luxury or an option, it's a matter of survival. Like with the gaming industry example earlier. Season passes and battle passes have become an almost mandatory aspect of modern multiplayer games. Without them, developers simply can't afford to sustain their games post-launch. It's not just games either, many creators and companies are stuck in this dilemma. Patreon and other similar platforms are now lifelines for creators. Despite this, the push for monthly subscriptions puts on additional pressure for their audience. As much as we might want to support our favorite creators, the constant demand for recurring payments from multiple platforms can feel overwhelming. It's a vicious cycle, really. Creators need to charge monthly fees to survive, but the more they charge, the more people feel the fatigue of too many subscriptions. The realities of capitalism exist at the root of all of it. In a free market, businesses are often incentivized to pursue profits wherever they can, and subscriptions offer a steady and reliable source of income. But it's not all about companies making money. Survival is an increasingly important factor in such a competitive market. The subscription model allows companies to project future earnings, keep investors happy, and maintain cash flow in ways that traditional one-time purchases don't. As a result of this status quo, capitalism has driven companies to exploit the subscription model in ways that aren't always fair to consumers. Many businesses don't need to charge exorbitant fees to stay afloat. Take Amazon Prime, for example, where users are occasionally offered discounts if they decide to cancel their subscription. Some of these discounts are pretty huge, so it makes you wonder why the initial price was set, especially if the company won't be bothered by a price reduction. The irony here is that while capitalism promotes competition, the subscription model often leads to monopolistic behavior. Once a company locks you into its ecosystem, leaving becomes very difficult. Companies aren't actually competing to provide the best service possible, and instead they're trying to trap you in a system that's hard to escape. Subscriptions aren't inherently evil. As we've explored throughout this episode, it's safe to say that they're simply a symptom of a larger, more systemic issue. One rooted in the structures of capitalism, convenience culture, and our own complicity. We live in a world that's increasingly driven by recurring payments, where access to information and other valuable needs are locked behind paywalls. In turn, we as consumers have normalized this because we've been conditioned to believe that this is just how things are now. Here's something to take away from all this. It does not have to be that way. There are better alternatives out there. For instance, by supporting open source software like Affinity or Blender for visual artists, there can be a little less reliance on subscription-based platforms. You can also back creators directly through their own off-platform projects or via platforms like Patreon. Although it's not a perfect solution, it's a conscious effort that can be a catalyst for more permanent changes in regulation when the time comes. These models offer more control and transparency than the endless loops of subscription fatigue. The key takeaway here isn't to swear off subscriptions altogether. Many services do provide real value, and not every company is out to exploit its users. Instead, we owe it to ourselves to become more conscious consumers, to push for better forms of support that don't rely on endless cycles of payments. By advocating for change and creating awareness instead of reinforcing docility, we can shift the tide. So, as you continue to navigate this landscape of subscriptions, remember that they're not the cause, but rather a reflection of a broader issue. Change lies in the choices we make as consumers. By the way, this is your sign to cancel that subscription that has been bothering you from the moment you read this video's title. Stoicism is changing.
You know, I've been reading Marcus Aurelius' Meditations.
Wow.
I listened to it in the sauna. It's really intense because you're thinking these are the writings, the direct writings that we have from a guy who lived 2,000 years ago and was running Rome.
Stoicism.
Stoicism.
As someone who has covered and studied Stoicism for years now, I've noticed something strange happening. If it was just another celebrity trend, then it's whatever. But what's happening is much worse than that. This ancient philosophy that was once a guide to living a good and fulfilled life has been co-opted by the manosphere and turned into snake oil, sold as the magic pill to fame, fortune, and everything in between.
And you need to be more misogynistic. This woman just spilled my coffee. Bitch! Bring some paper towels!
We're doing a fucking podcast. Stoicism's not feeling emotions. It's feeling the emotion and going, okay, stoicism, stoic.
My question is, why Stoicism? Out of all the other philosophies out there, why this one? In fact, why philosophy at all? Why do a bunch of macho men who laugh in the face of intellectualism cling on to the most intellectual ideologies? To find out how Stoicism became this billion-dollar scam, we interviewed experts, took a Stoicism course, and watched more AI-generated Stoicism videos than I'd like to admit. What I found out is that the rabbit hole goes far deeper than you could ever imagine.
For example, you see a woman getting raped, for example, and you are a Stoic.
The purpose of Stoicism isn't to educate, inspire, or enlighten, but rather to trick and exploit impressionable viewers.
Men are being conditioned to be weak, and you're being told, yeah, it's good to be emotional. Young men should be emotional. They should show that if you want to become successful, masculine, if you want to make a lot of money, if you want to date or sleep with a lot of girls, being emotional is not going to help you at all. Be stoic.
With the ultimate goal of making some very questionable characters famous and filthy rich.
The Matrix has attacked me.
While on a voyage at sea in 300 BC, a wealthy trader called Zeno was shipwrecked along with all of his cargo. Instantly, this wealthy man lost all that he had. After losing everything, Zeno learned that we have very little control over what life throws at us. However, what we do have control over is how these things affect us. He realized that although he couldn't control the weather or the sea, he could turn his loss into something positive by using his experience to teach others about how to overcome difficult situations. In doing so, he created the philosophy of Stoicism. Stoicism grew quickly across all segments of Greek society and beyond. From Zeno, who many believe was a foreigner with roots in modern Lebanon, through thinkers like Epictetus, a former slave, Portia Catonis, the first female Stoic, all the way to Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor and a skilled and insightful writer whose personal diaries, known as meditations, have become an entry point to the philosophy for centuries of Stoics up to the present day. In the centuries following Marcus Aurelius' death, Stoicism largely disappeared because of Christianity. As the Roman Empire made way for the Holy Roman Empire, everything in the Holy Gospel was treated as, well, gospel. And just about everything else was regarded as primitive pagan nonsense at best, and at worst the express lane to hell. All of that changed in the mid-20th century thanks to largely a handful of unrelated characters: a psychiatrist, a psychologist, and a soldier. But before we get to that, while working on this video, we dispatched 4 members of the Aperture team to explore the endless variety of Stoic tools being shared and sold across the internet. Of course, all the classic Stoic writings from Zeno through Marcus Aurelius have been in the public domain for thousands of years and are freely available with a quick Google search. Some of the other stuff, well, as you're about to see, that will cost you.
Okay, so for the next 7 days, I'll be learning everything I can about Stoicism and trying to apply it into my life using only free resources.
All right, so this just came in. I received my Stoicism game card. It's 50 prompt cards that, contains pretty much a lot of insights and sayings from the great Stoic.
All right, for my Stoic journey, I'm going to be talking to a Stoic coach, but not just any coach. He's just some guy that I found on Fiverr for like 30 bucks, so don't expect anything crazy. I'm not expecting much from this, but hey, he's selling a service and I'm going to purchase it.
And immerse myself in some daily Stoic practices, I chose to go to the #1 Stoic superstore on the internet, Ryan Holiday's dailystoic.com. I went ahead and selected a course called Taming Your Temper, the 11-day Stoic guide to controlling anger. Every day beginning with today, I get an email, I get a video, and most importantly, I get an activity to do to try to manage and control anger in keeping with the Stoic tradition. My day 1 activity is something originated by Abraham Lincoln, something called burn letters. You write down some things that you carry around with you that make you angry over and over. You write them down, you fold it up, you set it on fire, and in doing so, you literally start to unburden yourself of these things that, we're carrying around for no reason. So here we go with day 1.
During the Vietnam War, U.S. Admiral James Stockdale survived 7 unimaginable years as a prisoner of war in the infamous Hanoi Hilton. He was shackled and tortured. His leg, injured during his initial crash landing in enemy territory, was cruelly and repeatedly rebroken. He was paraded around and humiliated for propaganda purposes. After his release, many asked him how he was able to survive such a gruesome experience, and his answer became what is known today as the Stockdale paradox. It goes something like this. In Admiral Stockdale's experience, prisoners of war who held out hope that a release was always just around the corner eventually grew discouraged, gave up, and died. Stockdale believed he, along with his fellow survivors, were able to endure only because they didn't hold out hope for freedom. Instead, they made peace with the life even in the most brutal and dehumanizing circumstances. Instead of waiting for the light at the end of the tunnel, they embraced the darkness within it. And not surprisingly, throughout his ordeal, he took direct inspiration from history's most famous slave turned Stoic, Epictetus. Stockdale, a Medal of Honor winner and later a vice presidential candidate, published a celebrated book entitled Courage Under Fire, testing Epictetus' doctrines in a laboratory of human behavior. And suddenly, James Stockdale became the most famous Stoic in over a millennium. Meanwhile, Stoicism was also enjoying a renaissance in the emerging world of psychotherapy. And this is Massimo Pigliucci, philosopher, biologist, and author of How to Be a Stoic.
The history of modern Stoicism really started with the invention of cognitive behavioral therapy in the 1950s and early 60s. That's because the major people that started that approach to psychotherapy, like Aaron Beck and Albert Ellis, were directly inspired by the ancient Stoics, especially Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus. So there is a connection there, and that connection is important because since cognitive behavioral therapy is arguably the best evidence-based psychotherapy available today, so in other words, it works, it also indirectly shows that Stoic techniques work.
Ellis went so far as to say that the best way to sum up the spirit of CBT was a quote from Admiral Stockdale's favorite philosopher, Epictetus. Men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of them. Although giants in their field, neither Albert Ellis nor Aaron Beck were celebrity gurus by any stretch. If Instagram had existed back then, put together they wouldn't have been as popular as a single picture of Dan Bilzerian's boat. But, thanks to them, seeds had been planted that would bear unexpected fruit 40 years later.
The other thing that happened was there were already millions of people around the world who read the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius and read Seneca.
This is Donald Robertson, a cognitive behavioral psychotherapist and author of one of the most influential books on Stoicism of all time, How to Think Like a Roman Emperor.
But they didn't hang out together. They didn't talk to each other. They didn't congregate in little groups.
This is Jules Evans, a historian and author of another influential book, Philosophy for Life.
And that changed in the 1990s with the development of the internet.
The internet allowed this kind of diaspora of Stoics around the world to form online communities, and that's how it developed into a movement in a way that it was never able to before.
It was in this renaissance that Marcus Aurelius became a character in one of the most iconic movies of the last few decades, Gladiator.
Russell Crowe is really into Marcus Aurelius, and he wanted to feature more of his philosophy in the movie, but Richard Harris depicts Marcus Aurelius in the first act of that movie. There's little kind of tantalizing glimmers of Stoic philosophy in it, referenced actually. And lots of people went out and read the Meditations after they saw that movie.
As the Spaniard was seeking gladiatorial glory on the big screen, the internet age was coming into full bloom. Silicon Valley, some formerly sleepy San Francisco suburbs, suddenly became one of the epicenters of human civilization. Society-altering innovations, email, e-commerce, everything, were emerging regularly. Vast sums of wealth were seemingly created overnight. People were interested in what made this brave new tech world tick. The Silicon Valley life philosophy is embodied by a bunch of smart people who look at everything as a system or as a machine, including themselves. For every problem in life, there is a life hack. Why read a book when you can listen to it double time? Why get a good night's sleep when you can chug a coffee, pass out for 20 minutes, and then get back to work after a refreshing and restorative nappuccino? To the Silicon Valley mindset, worrying about things like finding angel investors is a bug in the system that needlessly eats up processing power, and so to manage that, they turned to cognitive behavioral therapy, the ultimate brain hack, and its unexpected traveling companion, Stoicism.
The phenomenon of Silicon Valley CEOs jumping in the bandwagon in some ways is kind of, sometimes it's sincere, but sometimes it's this kind of superficial thing of Stoicism's trendy and I want to be a part of that. Or I like Stoicism because I saw this cool quote on the internet, which is perhaps completely fabricated and not something that an ancient Stoic ever actually said.
This Stoic revival might have just been another here today, gone tomorrow Silicon Valley fad, like hyperloops and juice machines that really just squeeze packets of juice for you, were it not for one of the major characters in our story, Ryan Holiday.
There are entrepreneurs who've done incredibly well just repackaging Stoic maxims. When I brought out my book in 2012, my publisher said, "Why don't you bring out a book of Stoic maxims?" And I said, "That sounds boring." What an idiot. I could have made lots of money doing that, and others did.
Holiday found bestseller success with his Stoicism self-help book, The Obstacle is the Way. The Obstacle is the Way was published with help from Holiday's friend, Silicon Valley angel investor and celebrity lifestyle influencer, Tim Ferriss. It's hard to imagine a more potent duo than Holiday and Ferriss for popularizing Stoicism in the mainstream. Who knows how many thousands, even millions of people have been exposed to Stoicism because of these two. Credit where credit is due, The Obstacle is the Way is a solid starter kit that has launched many readers on a path to genuine Stoicism.
I am familiar with, Ryan's work, and I know Ryan, and I've read The Obstacle is the Way, and I thought it was quite basic, but that's its strength. I mean, he pitches it at a certain level, at a certain sweet spot, which really carries. And I don't know what percentage of his millions of followers go from his work to buying Marcus Aurelius's Meditations or Epictetus's Discourses. I would think it would be very high. I mean, I wish I was as good at marketing as him.
The issue is that The Obstacle is the Way also launched an empire in which a bunch of millennia-old wisdom was now somehow for sale. That and a bunch of shiny, and some might say tacky, Stoicism swag.
Does he sell plastic skulls, or? I'm not sure.
One thing I found interesting was that before becoming a full-time promoter of Stoicism, Holiday's previous jobs had all involved helping big corporations sell stuff. His previous book was called Growth Hacker Marketing, and the one before that? Trust me, I'm lying.
Look, our job is to do anything that grows the business.
And Holiday did indeed grow his business, opening up shop through his website, dailystoic.com. Honestly, at times it's hard to tell how much of Holiday's drive comes from a sincere desire to share Stoicism with the world, and how much is just a world-class salesman making a buck.
There is a distinction to be made there between, sort of selling in general and selling and merchandising. I think merchandising is a particular type of selling. It's selling of things that you don't actually need for the exclusive purpose of making money. So to buy a medallion that has a bones and a skull that says "Memento Mori," remember you have to die. That's not useful to anybody. That's just a way to make money.
Business at the Daily Stoic is definitely booming. Ryan Holiday's net worth is estimated at between $5 and $10 million. And with that growth hacker mentality, that number is only going to keep rising. Holiday professes a sincere devotion to Stoicism, going back to his college days. And we don't doubt that he's telling the truth, but scrolling through the store at dailystoic.com, one can't help but wonder, what would Zeno think? Influencers and other online entrepreneurs took notice not only of Holiday's success, but also of how his brand was infiltrating the professional sports world. Copies of The Obstacle is the Way became as common in US pro locker rooms as sneakers and ice packs.
If you're, for instance, a member of a competitive sports team, sure, what people call life hacks are going to be useful. Yes, they are. But that's not Stoicism. Those are just the techniques.
Then you get these entrepreneurs who are millionaires and billionaires. And that's massive high social proof saying Stoicism is fantastic. And so that spreads out. People say, well, if this NFL quarterback is using it, that sounds good to me. So men look to very successful men and say, what makes them great? Is there anything that I could take on board?
Gwyneth Paltrow hired a kind of interior designer or something to advise her on what books to have on her bookshelf. Not to read, but what ones to have in her living room. And they recommended Stoicism because it's trending. So that's how trendy Stoicism has suddenly become.
Even the mainstream media was getting in on the act. More and more people were coming to the same conclusion. If Stoicism was good enough for pro athletes, Bill Gates, and even Hollywood actors like Michael Douglas, maybe it was the missing cheat code separating regular guys from achieving everything they wanted in life.
So we have a lot of authors now, podcasters and YouTubers and so on and so forth, who tell you things like, oh, you want to succeed at sports? Embrace Stoicism. You want to become rich? Embrace Stoicism. You want to be successful? Embrace Stoicism. The Stoics will be stunned by all of this, because all of those things I just mentioned, success, money, fame, and so on and so forth, are classified by the ancient Stoics as indifference, meaning that they do not make a difference, literally, to the only thing that matters, which is your character.
As awareness of Stoicism grew, it became even more watered down, turned into a bunch of maxims and life hacks to fix whatever life problem you had.
The so-called life hacks are techniques that are useful in order to practice Stoicism, to incorporate Stoicism as a way of life. Okay? But that's all they are. They are crutches, in a sense. They are kind of useful techniques that allows you to stay on track. But the important thing is the track, not the technique.
I mean, life hack's an odd phrase, isn't it? It's not really one that the Stoics would use. Other Stoic life hacks.
It's very accessible, it's very DIY, and that makes it kind of attractive in the age of the internet.
Somewhere along the way, the true message of this ancient Greek philosophy got drowned in the sea of life hacks. When it washed up on the other side, it was a mutant offspring, something so far removed from its origins that if Marcus Aurelius was alive today, he wouldn't even recognize it. Stoicism became Groicism.
Do I remember when the manosphere started to become a thing? In all honesty, I was a kind of Johnny-come-lately. Other people were saying, are you concerned about the Stoicism being hijacked by people in the manosphere that are distorting it? And my initial reaction was, what are you talking about? I've no idea. I've never seen that. And I was surrounded by people that are interested in Stoicism. I organized and spoke at many conferences. I thought I had my finger on the pulse of how Stoicism was being appreciated, but I didn't know about the Red Pill movement and the manosphere until much later, really. Although I guess in retrospect, I'd seen traces of it. So I'd seen books earlier and articles by people who portrayed Stoicism in a way that seemed quite odd to me.
It was around the time that my book, Philosophy for Life and Other Dangerous Situations, came out, which was in 2012. And I got contacted and invited to be on a podcast to talk about Stoicism. And I looked into the podcast, and it was a white supremacist, Southern secessionist podcast. One of the podcast hosts was actually one of the organizers of the Charlottesville white supremacy march. And I was astounded. I was like, how did these people get into Stoicism?
Groicism, in its simplest terms, is Stoicism that has been hijacked and manipulated to fit the narrative of the manosphere and Red Pill community. It's Stoicism for the bros. For the uninitiated, some quick background on the quote-unquote manosphere, a term, by the way, coined by a former porn star known as Ian Ironwood. The manosphere is synonymous with the Red Pill mentality borrowed from the Matrix movies, a mentality notably disavowed by the people who actually made the Matrix. Conceived as backlash against the general perception that feminism had gone out of control and that girls were no longer going wild in the way that real men could get behind. The manosphere, as the name implies, became a catch-all term for a network of male-centric online communities, everything from alpha males and pickup artists to involuntary celibates, aka incels, to the alt-right, the far-right, and beyond. For reasons we'll do our best to explain, Stoicism, or rather Groicism, is now running rampant in the manosphere, causing a surprisingly contagious philosophical brain flu. Just listen to Taylor's call with a supposed Stoic leader.
All right, so it's been about 4 days since I purchased this Stoic course on Fiverr, but so far I'm getting ghosted and I paid like $50 for it, so yeah. So after nearly a week, my Stoic coach decided to finally respond.
You are fat, Miss Johanna, for example. There is no reason to feel sad. Why are you telling me this? People are calling me fat. Yeah, but you are fat. And I'm gonna ask you another thing, Miss Johanna. Do you wanna continue to be fat or no? No. Okay. Can you take control of your diet? Hey, it's hard, it's this, it's that. Yeah, but can you actually do it? For example, you see a woman getting raped and you are a Stoic. Like, you can pass through unfazed if you want, because that's your choice.
And although the rest of our crew didn't experience the same terrible lectures, you can tell that you really can't buy Stoic teachings.
This is my day 3 check-in. I'm doing the Ryan Holiday dailystoic.com Taming Your Temper daily guide to controlling your anger. Every day I get something to read, I get a video to watch, and I get a physical activity that I'm supposed to do. Yesterday, day 2, the instruction was to look in a mirror and make angry faces. Personally, I would say my experience looking in a mirror, mean mugging felt more silly than anything. Today on day 3, the instruction was drawing on the life lessons of the Adam Sandler movie, Happy Gilmore, was to learn to find your happy space. I would say I was expecting at this point something a little bit more substantial from Stoic content, but it's only day 3. We got 4 more days to go.
It's currently day 3, and after watching the videos on the first day, I started reading the classics. I've been reading Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, and it's honestly such an eye-opener. And the best part about it is that the book is in the public domain. You don't have to spend a penny to buy it. There are also writings from Epicurus, Seneca, and even Zeno, so you can learn directly from the founding fathers of Stoicism without paying for any course or anything at all.
Alright, so it's been 3 days now, and I made it a little routine for myself. So every day I'm picking a card, reading the quotes. They're mostly from Marcus Aurelius and Seneca, which I have to say has been a very interesting way to just, take 10 minutes a day. Doesn't take too much of your time, and still a good way to change your perspective a little bit. So let's continue.
So if we had to define Stoicism in its pillars, so to speak, yeah, I would agree that one of them is certainly the acknowledgement that we only control our intentions and the actions that we initiate, not the outcomes. And that is in fact consistent with Stoicism. That's real Stoicism. That's what Epictetus says right at the beginning of his manual for a good life. And that actually is a very healthy way of thinking about things. That's also the basis of certain versions of cognitive behavioral therapy. Rational emotive behavioral therapy, for instance, studied by Albert Ellis, which is a type of CBT, starts out precisely with that kind of acknowledgement. So that's fine. But the second thing that the Stoics seem to believe is that they need to suppress emotions, that they cannot afford to be seen as weak. That is not Stoicism. That's a fundamental distortion of Stoicism.
Too many men are being conditioned to accept weakness.
Some of my Stoic writings are used or misused in the manosphere and by the Broics, the red pill Stoics. And I've seen that, and it's like you cringe and you say, oh, I guess I should explain myself better the next time.
Unlike genuine Stoicism, Broicism is rarely presented as a process for becoming your best self. Like a get-rich-quick scheme or a workout routine promising instant abs, Broicism is all about results. Once unleashed in the manosphere, Broicism became a one-size-fits-all answer to all questions of the alpha male variety.
But like everything, it becomes trendy, and now what you'll find is more people become interested in Stoicism because they've read articles or read podcasts than because they've actually read the Stoics. So with that, there's a risk of dilution, as many of the articles contain AI-generated content, fake quotes and things like that. So you're definitely now entering a phase where you get a lot of people becoming attracted to Stoicism but getting a really inaccurate representation of what the Stoics said.
This is the unpredictability of how culture evolves, and memes evolve in unpredictable directions. Someone wrote a book about using Stoic techniques to win a poker championship. You know, there was a Stoic dating app.
Let's take money. So Stoicism, in that sense, with the dollar sign or the Silicon Valley Stoicism, is a distortion because it replaces the actual Stoic value, which is your character, your judgment, with things that the Stoics themselves were very clear in saying they don't matter.
Stoicism invariably presents overly simple solutions to complicated questions. One of the perks of Stoicism is that it can be easily twisted into just about anything an opportunistic influencer wants it to be. It's an example of the Barnum effect, a psychological phenomenon in which vague and general audience appears to be tailored to a specific individual, when in reality it applies to a wide range of people. It's like horoscopes, fortune tellers, psychics. In other words, charlatans who make a living preying on people's fears and insecurities by telling them vague nonsense masqueraded as knowledgeable insights. What prompted us to make this video in the first place is that we saw a resurgence in the popularity of our Stoicism video. And when I first made the video, it did really well, don't get me wrong, but in the past year or two it's gotten way more popular than I could have thought. In fact, right now it's the most popular video on the channel with over 11 million views. The problem is that the more popular the video got, the more comments you started to see from people who seemed to know more about Stoicism than Stoicism. People who wanted to learn how to get rich the Stoic way, how to get over a breakup the Stoic way, how to turn off their emotions the Stoic way. And if you're watching this and you had those questions, I want you to know I'm not judging you at all for that. I've had these questions myself, especially when I was younger. The sad reality of today's world is that there's many young men who don't have a steady adult male role model in their lives. So when male influencers who have the money, the women, the power, and the luxury these young boys dream of, it's easy to see why they get drawn to them. And the message of Stoicism is also very attractive to these young boys. The promise that you can will yourself to become completely self-reliant, powerful, and wealthy is obviously appealing.
Because young men are often quite vulnerable and insecure about their masculinity. So they tend to look towards things that they think can fill that gap in their life. And if they think being tough and having a stiff upper lip is symbolic of masculinity, that's something that they can become quite attached to as a philosophy of life. And they associate it, rightly or wrongly, with Stoicism and Marcus Aurelius and guys like that.
Men are not into therapy culture, but they're very into Stoicism. And Stoicism is basically therapy with gladiator metaphors. Stoicism, the ethos is quite tough love. If you read Epictetus, it's quite tough love. And I think that appeals to men.
Jules Evans believes the modern world has unwittingly created an opening for Stoicism to move in.
I think Western culture has moved to a different kind of model, which is blame your environment. If you're feeling bad, blame your environment. Blame your economy, blame the actions of other people, blame systemic injustice of some form or other. In other words, you are right to be miserable. That's kind of, that's a very caricatured version of a certain type of left-wing argument. If you make an extreme version of that argument, you are going to leave a real opening for people on the right to just put forward this very basic idea and win followers. The very basic idea being, stop blaming other people, stop behaving like a victim, stop complaining all the time, that's weakness.
In fairness, we do live in challenging times. People are looking for answers and they don't have much faith in institutions like the church or government to catch them if they fall. There's a growing sense that it's every man for himself. Some have argued that as organized religion has faded, people are looking elsewhere for a new rulebook to guide them. And just like the Bible, Stoicism can be whatever you want it to be. It's been widely noted that many people who believe in the divine authority of the Bible have never actually read the Bible. In the same way, many devotees of Stoicism are too busy scrolling through their phone to actually go read classic Stoic texts. That means manosphere influencers can claim whatever they say has roots in genuine Stoicism, and the odds are none of their followers will call BS. Although one does have to wonder, If Stoicism as it's packaged and sold in the manosphere isn't actual Stoicism, why even bother calling it that?
I think there has always been an audience for a certain kind of male self-help, which is maybe less geared towards healing and relationships and more geared towards like success and being a man of power, being a kind of great man. And that kind of genre, I think has always kind of looked for older traditional sources of advice, whether that's, samurais or whatever.
There is a widespread problem of this kind. Not only certain communities embrace anti-intellectualism and embrace certain values that are, shall we say, questionable at least, but they want to use cultural references, which is kind of ironic considering that these communities tend to be anti-intellectual. But they feel the need to have some kind of pedigree that justifies their position. Once a tradition has established itself as respectable for whatever reasons, once it has become particularly sufficiently popular that people recognize it and they say, oh yeah, Marcus Aurelius, oh yeah, this guy or that guy, then inevitably somebody tries to co-opt it.
So if it's not the actual genuine content of the philosophy, what is it about the brand of Stoicism that makes it so sellable in the manosphere? For starters, I think we can agree that the word just sounds kinda cool. In common parlance, being stoic means the strong, silent type. Needless to say, this image plays well to the would-be alpha males. The problem is that being stoic and stoicism are two very different things.
There is a difference between what sometimes we call capital S Stoicism and little s Stoicism. So when you hear somebody saying, "Oh, that person is being really stoic," usually they don't mean he's following the philosophy of Stoicism. What they mean is, oh, he's putting a stiff upper lip. He's not reacting to the situation. He's trying to control his emotions. He's trying to sort of tough it up, basically. That is a psychological attitude, which turns out there is now fairly good empirical evidence is actually damaging. It's not a good thing. It's bad for your mental health if you try to be stoic with a little s. Stoicism with a capital S, on the other hand, is the philosophy.
Although the term Stoicism is often misused and misinterpreted, the basic principles of capital S Stoicism are fairly easy to grasp, at least compared to other philosophies. Ancient Stoicism lends itself to easy-to-remember and highly marketable catchphrases. The phrase memento mori, a reminder of man's mortality, literally meaning remember you must die, appears to be one of Ryan Holiday's best-selling medallions. But still, why has Stoicism succeeded where other formerly trending philosophies, like, say, Buddhism, have not? It can't just be because people think Roman centurions look awesome and that 300 was a sick movie, can it?
So why are people in the manosphere drawn to Roman stuff? Like why? Like that? It's like that trend recently about how often do men think about the Roman Empire? That kind of trope. Is there something about it? Yeah, like, gosh, I mean, Rome was a militaristic society. It permeated Roman culture and symbolism. It was autocratic. And I think if you're going to exploit adolescent boys, which is something people have done throughout history, the go-to way of doing that is to accuse them of being unmanly and drive that message home to them and then offer to solve it for them. And then, you're going to refer to autocratic societies and strong leaders or despots.
Perhaps Stoicism outshines Eastern philosophies because Buddhism, Taoism, and the like have been tainted by associations with 1960s counterculture and its modern offshoot, the touchy-feely New Age movement. It's further been suggested that the chauvinism that taints so much of the red pill alt-right movements is also at play, positioning themselves in opposition to a caricature of woke liberals bowing to the exotic superiority of Eastern wisdom. Western chauvinists insist that the great forces which have civilized and elevated man uniformly originated in the West. Perhaps that has helped drive the rise of Stoicism? Donald Robertson disagrees.
In my own case, I immersed myself in reading Asian philosophy when I was a young guy. I read Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, Tao Te Ching, Wei Shang Su, like all that kind of stuff, right? And I loved it. But then when I found Stoicism, I connected with it in a different way. I don't think because I idolized Western chauvinistic value, but because I had a kind of what I would describe as a deja vu experience. I thought some of this stuff seems kind of familiar to me. You know, I've heard some of these concepts in our own culture.
Other observers are more skeptical.
You can see that kind of there's also kind of traditionalist school or kind of camp who say like we should go back to the, Western civilization's the best. We should teach like the greats. We should teach the Stoics in high school and in universities and so on. That kind of chauvinism, and you even see kind of Stoicism being taken up by white supremacists.
It definitely doesn't hinder Broicism's appeal that one of the leading names in Stoicism is Marcus Aurelius. If you're going to absorb the life lessons of an ancient philosopher, might as well think like a Roman emperor, right?
If I'd written a book about how to think like a Roman slave, and it was about Epictetus, maybe we can test this one day, but I don't think anyone would have read it. I don't think it would have sold many copies. I think a lot of people picked up How to Think Like a Roman Emperor because they thought Roman emperors seem manly and powerful.
In reality, Marcus Aurelius was a skilled military and political leader, but between running an empire and writing his Meditations, he probably didn't have as much time to hit the gym as it sometimes appears in the manosphere. In thumbnails for videos touting the virtues of Broicism, Marcus Aurelius often appears to be on some heavy-duty steroids, and come to think of it, the beard looks suspiciously modern too.
Yeah, maybe I'm guilty of a kind of bait and switch strategy here, but unapologetically, right? So we kind of reel them in because they want to be like a Roman emperor, a powerful autocratic figure. And then when they get there, they realize it's different at the top, and Marcus Aurelius wasn't particularly autocratic. Because he'd seen through the illusions of power, and actually I think that's a very compelling strategy.
Clearly whoever's in charge of the algorithms on YouTube and social media knows this stuff sells. Click on a bunch of Broicism links for a couple days, say, because you're researching on a documentary on the subject, and in our experience, your suggestions feed will be dead for weeks. And it's not an accident. The stuff sells. Powers that be at YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok know it, and they're all feeding in on it. So what exactly does Broicism get wrong about Stoicism? For starters, calling Stoicism a Greek philosophy. That might get you some funny looks in Greece.
Well, there's kind of interesting trivia about the early history of Stoicism. Lots of things, but probably one of the main one is occasionally you'll hear people criticizing Stoicism as being a philosophy of dead, rich, white dudes or something like that. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Certainly Marcus Aurelius is a dead, rich, white dude, but he was the last famous Stoic. The founder of Stoicism was not even Greek, he was Phoenician. So the Greeks saw him as a foreign immigrant. And so Stoicism was seen as an immigrant philosophy, I believe, to begin with.
And as for the whole stiff upper lip, strong, silent type thing.
It is not the case that ancient Stoics don't talk about their emotions. In fact, as the philosopher Martha Nussbaum said to me, no one talks about their emotions more than the Stoics in ancient philosophy. The Stoics, it's all they talk about, emotions.
Let's face it, no philosophy makes it into the mainstream without getting watered down and distorted in the process. And let's not even get started on religion, but nowadays, some online alpha male influencers have drunk so much Kool-Aid that they've convinced themselves that they're the actual experts.
I've been told, and some of my colleagues have been told several times by red pill so-called Stoics, that we don't know what we're talking about when it comes to the interpretation of the Stoic text, as opposed to people who just read one translation in English of that book and they think that they understood it. It's a very interesting phenomenon psychologically, sociologically, in and of itself.
The differences between Stoicism and Broicism. Let's start here. To the Stoics, both ancient and modern, like Admiral Stockdale, obstacles were just that. Obstacles. Life was full of them, and to think that you could will reality to change was setting yourself up for failure and unhappiness. You needed to accept the inevitable and train yourself accordingly. In more modern parlance, you needed to learn how to be comfortable being uncomfortable. But to Ryan Holiday, to quote the title of his book, the obstacle is the way. The way to what? In the world of Broicism, pretty much anything you think will make you happy. This leads us to probably one of the most dangerous elements of Broicism.
The Broics have a third pillar that seems to be recurring in their writings or their discussions every time that I spend some time in those quarters, and that is a profound degree of sexism bordering on misogyny. And I don't use the word misogyny lightly. So these are frankly weird people who are into hyper-masculinity and tend to be seriously on the sexist / misogynist side of things, and so on and so forth. One can make an argument that the ancient Stoics talk in a way that we would consider sexist. Seneca and Epictetus from time to time do say things like, don't behave like a woman, don't be womanly, that sort of stuff, right? And, sure, those were people who lived 2,000 years ago. They were a result of their own society, and we cringe today when we read that kind of stuff.
How did Stoicism ever get so far off the rails? On what basis does Broicism justify rampant sexism, or even worse? The best explanation the manosphere can offer mostly comes down to a bad translation.
When you ask them, where the hell did you get that? Usually the answer is, oh, well, the word virtue, remember I said that Stoicism is a type of virtue ethics. Virtues are character traits, right? Things like generosity, courage, and so on and so forth. And so these people, the Broics, the Red Pill Stoics, say, well, the word virtue in Latin is vir, V-I-R, and vir also meant man, so, again, manly man. And this is baffling because vir itself was actually a translation by the Romans of the original Greek arete. Arete is genderless. It doesn't have anything to do with genders. And it just means excellence.
What does Broicism get right? Not much, really. The goal of Stoicism and of life in general is eudaimonia. There's no direct translation for eudaimonia in English, but the closest equivalent might be well-being. Basically, an extended and consistent state of peace and acceptance with both the ups and downs in life. The goal of Broicism is almost the complete opposite of that. It's the idea that you need a steady stream of success and external validation to feel good about where you stack up in the pecking order. The big issue isn't just that Broicism gives Stoicism a bad name, it's by that misrepresenting what the philosophy actually is. The exact people who could really use Stoicism are being baited and switched and fed dangerous nonsense instead. Donald Robertson says if you squint, you can see a sliver of hope in the spread of Broism.
One thing I'd say about social media is I think, the people say dumb things, not entirely seriously sometimes. It makes it seem sometimes I think that these views are more prevalent than they actually are. Like I'm optimistic. I give people a little bit more credit than the internet. I think of Stoicism in a way as like a Trojan horse. Like people are attracted to it because they're looking for something that makes them even more manly than they are already, or even tougher than they are already. But inside it, what they find is a bunch of tools and concepts that resemble those found in modern cognitive behavioral therapy.
Once you discover Broicism and then seek to learn more, like all the new visitors in the comment sections of our Stoicism videos, hi, by the way, you start on a journey that, with any luck, can lead you to actual Stoicism. And if you think this might apply to you, then we're happy to have you, because you're the reason we made this video. If you've only encountered Stoicism as practiced in the manosphere, the truth may surprise you. And speaking of using Stoicism in our lives, let's check in with our team one last time and see how the rest of their week as practicing Stoics panned out.
Alright, I just got out of my call with the Stoic coach, and I think when we think of Broicism and what Stoicism has become, I think this dude is a pretty good representative of it in a way. Just the examples he used were bizarre. It was always violence against you, violence against women, as someone who like doesn't have a ton of knowledge in it, this kind of made me want to stay away, because I'm like, if this is the community potentially, if this is the people running courses, then why would I want to do this? Yeah, I think overall that call was just not successful, and I had to pay like 30 bucks for it, so not that fun.
All right, so this is day 7 today. We had a check-in with the team last week, and I was very curious to hear from my colleagues' experience with this online course, and I decided to book it for myself as well. I have to say I'm super curious to see whether or not it's gonna adapt his talking points, also because I'm a woman, so I'm gonna be paying attention to that and see if my experience is any different from my colleague, and we'll see. So I just finished my call with the Stoic course. Overall, very simplistic, no deep learning, no real human connection, like going deep into the subject. Nothing controversial, contrary to my colleague. Like he didn't go into anything completely outrageous whatsoever. So he definitely, I think, adapted to his public, which was me in that case. Yeah, just mixed feelings. I would not say that was a waste of my time, but I don't think it can provide any useful tips or life advices to people. And there are so many other resources that are actually much more interesting than that. But it was worth trying.
This is day 7, my final check-in. I've completed the Taming Your Temper course from Ryan Holiday's Daily Stoic. And overall, I would say I wasn't expecting a ton from this course, but I'm a big believer you can find some words of wisdom just about anywhere. But look, obviously Ryan Holiday knows that if people want to rigorously study real Stoicism, there's better places to do that than his website. That's not who he's pitching this at. And I'm sure he'd be the first to tell you if you have like a real anger issue, it's going to take more than a 7-day email course to fix your problems. But all in all, this felt like something, if you were going to set up a program for school children to learn some basic Stoic life lessons, this would be a good course for little kids more than grown-ups, I think. I wasn't expecting a ton, but all in all, I would have to say I was somewhat underwhelmed in general by my experience with the Taming Your Temper Daily Stoic course, especially considering it costs $50 to get all these emails.
Okay, so it's the last day of the challenge, and I honestly can say I've learned so much. Everything you need to know about Stoicism is available to learn for free. I've learned so much, and there's still so much more that I haven't even touched. We'll be leaving links to the best free Stoicism resources in the description down below.
In conclusion, the contrast between the original Stoics and the Manosphere influencers claiming to be Stoics is pretty striking. Really, the difference is night and day.
The goal is to become a better person. Better person is defined as somebody who actually cares, gives a crap about other people, and does something about it as opposed to just talking about it.
And it emphasizes the idea that our character is more important ultimately in terms of the meaning of life and our quality of life than external goods like wealth and reputation.
Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, rejected the followers who urged him to give the movement he started his name. He wanted to focus on the ideas, not himself, and he rejected the pursuit of personal glory as poison for the soul. Although no doubt flattered to be acknowledged by a powerful man, Zeno is said to have declined an imperial invitation to visit Antigonus, the Greek general who succeeded Alexander the Great. It was said that Zeno avoided large social gatherings, preferring quiet study, and that he disliked verbose and elaborate speeches. Although he had known the pleasures of life as a wealthy merchant, Zeno refused to make money from teaching philosophy and instead lived a spare and ascetic life. So what would Zeno think if he could see the world today? What would his advice be for people who wanted to follow his virtuous path? They might surprise many of the people who invoke the name of the philosophy Zeno founded in their pursuit of fame and profit. Unlike many in the Manosphere, he would reject far-right nationalism. After all, Stoics coined the word cosmopolitan, which literally means citizen of the world.
Stoicism is about cosmopolitanism. It's about considering every other human being on the planet as literally your sister and your brother.
We're all part of one cosmic city, the cosmopolis. We're all cosmopolitans. Therefore, we should treat people, whatever culture they're in, fairly and justly as a brother or sister.
He would fight inequality in all forms.
The one thing that Zeno and early Stoics in particular thought was toxic was this idea of becoming alienated from our fellow brothers and sisters in the human race. So racism, sexism, all these kind of prejudices and isms, really fly in the face of the fundamental goal of Stoicism, which is achieving a sense of harmony and unity among mankind.
And what of the manosphere itself? What do you think? What is the goal of Stoicism? A hint is that it probably doesn't have anything to do with girls in bikinis.
To put it more simply, it's to achieve your innate potential as a rational, self-aware, thinking being.
Zeno arrived at the principles of Stoicism when a disaster outside of his control forced him to make sense of life in a new and deeper way. He was able to do so not by rebuilding his lost wealth and recapturing his former glory, but by developing a philosophy that would allow him to be satisfied with nothing. In the same spirit, Marcus Aurelius, during his lifetime, the wealthiest man on earth, gladly parted with a substantial portion of his fortune to aid his fellow Roman citizens, saying, "The only wealth which you will keep forever is the wealth that you've given away." Other recent real-life figures provide shining examples of the value of true Stoicism amidst the worst life could ever throw at us. Not just Admiral James Stockdale, also fellow prisoner of war turned senator John McCain and Holocaust survivor turned author Primo Levi. These worthy examples of Stoicism didn't seek glory, fame, or wealth. They simply did the hard work of surviving life at its worst and coming out the other side permanently stronger. That is the way of the Stoic. And always remember, be wary of anyone who is too eager to tell you the way you should live. For in the words of Zeno himself, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we should listen more than we say.
You said that you don't like to fly commercial because you don't want to get into a tube with a bunch of demons. Do you really believe that human beings are demons?
No, I do not. And don't you ever say I did.
This is Kenneth Copeland, a televangelist whose net worth is estimated at over $700 million, nearly all of which is untaxed. Wealth that he generated through donations from his followers, many of whom can barely afford to make ends meet. And he's not alone. All over the world, religious leaders live in excess, while their followers live in scarcity. Take a look at this. On the left, you see a map of global economic development, and on the right is how religious each country is. Now, watch what happens when we layer them on top of each other. They're almost complete opposites. So the wealthier a country is, the less religious it is, and the more religious, the poorer. Why? To figure it out, me and my team spoke to world-renowned religious scholars, priests, economists, and people who have been hurt deeply by the very institutions they once trusted. What we uncovered was more than just a coincidence.
Where does your money come from?
It comes from book sales.
Oh yeah, the people don't pay to go to church. They don't. You don't.
It was a pattern.
Money coming to me now. Money coming to me.
A system.
Shh. Giving is worship.
Ha 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 ha.
This is the story of how religion scammed the world.
We support our pastor. That's what we're here for. He doesn't need a cheap airplane. He needs the best.
When I saw that graphic, the first person that came to mind was our producer, Emeka, who lives in Nigeria. I just had to show him and ask what he thought of it.
As someone who lives in one of the 20 poorest countries in the world, one that also happens to have the second largest Christian population in Africa, when Cole showed me these two graphs, I wasn't really surprised, because that's my reality. The poorer people are, the more religious they become. But I've always wondered, why?
Jesus never visited any poor person in the house. Read your Bible. That means he hates poverty. He hates people who are poor. He died for you not to be poor. So how can you now come into a church, have that kind of mentality? You can come poor, but you're not permitted to remain poor. It is wrong.
This is Pastor David Ibiyomi, one of Nigeria's most popular preachers, saying categorically that Jesus hates the poor, in a country where over half the population lives in abject poverty. Look up any list of the world's wealthiest pastors and you'll find at least 3 Nigerian preachers, each with a net worth of over $100 million. Meanwhile, the minimum wage in Nigeria is less than $50. not per hour, not per week, but per month. That's under $600 a year. Nigeria has the second largest Christian population in Africa, over 70 million people, many of whom are living in poverty while their pastors live like kings. And it's not just Nigeria.
All around the world, the prosperity gospel is becoming more and more popular. There's already a cliche of the money-hungry televangelists who flaunt their own wealth, all the while constantly urging their much poorer followers to give and give and give until they have nothing left. The basic concept of prosperity theology isn't hard to explain. It boils down to this: God's faithful shall inherit the earth. Therefore, being rich is an earthly sign that you are one of those faithful. It's a neat bit of mental gymnastics. No need to choose between being righteous and being rich. You can have your cake and eat it. What's more, on the other hand, by this logic, being poor or even just sick can be interpreted as a sign you may already be on the highway to hell. To most of us, the logic is questionable. And yet, prosperity theology has now been a profitable pursuit for over a century. That's right. Although it might seem new, this scam has been going on for a very long time. An early 20th century Philadelphia Baptist minister named Russell Conwell famously told his flock, "You have no right to be poor." As a sort of Pied Piper of the prosperity gospel, Conwell tirelessly toured America, delivering his famous Acres of Diamonds speech countless of times, combining a message of faith with the language of modern get-rich-quick schemes.
Never in the history of the world did a poor man without capital have the opportunities to get rich quickly and honestly as he does in our country today. I say it is the truth, and I want you to accept it as such.
As a larger movement, the prosperity gospel began taking root in the 1950s. While Conwell had promised wealth based in Christian faith and honest hard work, another preacher by the name of Oral Roberts tweaked that message, explicitly linking earthly success with divine intervention, and started promising his followers that whatever they contributed would, through God's grace, come back sevenfold. Oral Roberts drew thousands of worshippers under the enormous tent with which he traveled the United States. But his message and prosperity gospel as a whole completely exploded after one invention that allowed them to reach millions, not thousands, without leaving the comfort of their home church: the television. Prosperity preachers like Roberts rubbed shoulders on the airwaves with so-called faith healers, who sold the promise of medical cures where medical science had failed their followers, and usually also sold an array of miracle oils and potions. A true snake oil salesman. Showmanship is a major component of this type of preaching, so as time went on, succeeding generations of televangelists went increasingly extra in order to secure followers and to keep donations flowing. Broadcast production values grew.
We propelled, birds propel, eagles don't propel. We said, oh God, 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 oh God.
The link between giving in God's name and becoming wealthy in return became ever more explicit, and the appeals for contributions became more intense. Often they were more like demands, even threats.
There will be 50 people give $1,000, and do it right now, or I am finished. Try me.
As increasingly wealthy televangelists flaunted increasingly lavish lifestyles, almost inevitably there were very public downfalls. You might have thought after that age of excess people would learn their lesson. But instead, whenever one televangelist fell, there were always plenty more waiting to take their place. As mass media allowed prosperity preachers to reach mass audiences, the houses of worship in which congregations gathered grew to look less like churches and more like stadiums, or even ancient coliseums. First, there were mega churches, then even giga churches, defined as religious gathering places holding over 10,000 people. Many megachurch preachers openly bragged about their insane amounts of wealth.
I've owned 3 different jets in my life, and I used them and just burning them up for the Lord Jesus Christ. I really believe that if Jesus was physically on the earth today, he wouldn't be riding a donkey.
And the movement expanded beyond the borders of the US.
Coming back to my home country, it is one of the poorest 20 countries on earth, and yet we have pastors that are worth well over $100 million with private jets and mansions so big you wonder if the entire host of heavens lives there in physical form. Not surprisingly, whenever this type of message spreads, familiar scandals follow. Nigerian mega preacher TB Joshua offered inspirational sermons and faith healings, and he accumulated a following counting in the millions across Africa, South America, Europe, and the rest of the world. He died suddenly in 2021 with a net worth in the tens of millions of dollars. Shortly after his passing, his legacy was completely ruined by a shocking BBC investigation which suggested a series of sexual assaults, forced confinement, forced abortions, and other heinous abuses, victimizing dozens of church followers across the countries that his mission brought him. But here's the thing that always stumped me. I grew up Christian, and from everything I read about Jesus, he would hate the prosperity gospel. A critical element of his story is the fact that the literal Son of God came to earth not as a king or a rich man, but a carpenter's son born in a manger among farm animals. The only time Jesus got physically mad in the Bible was when there were people buying and selling in a place of worship. Everybody knows Jesus would never own a mansion, right? Right? So why do so many sincerely faithful people who believe in Jesus still dip into their own savings and spend it all on so-called men of God who already own entire cities?
If you're prioritizing Jesus in the New Testament, you don't really have a leg to stand on with the prosperity gospel, which is why I don't see an awful lot of those sermons quoting from the New Testament. I see them just talking about principles and appropriating a passage here or there, usually from the Hebrew Bible, to try to support their point.
Perhaps you've seen this man on TikTok or on YouTube.
Hey everybody, as many of you already know, my new book, The Bible Says So, is out, and the fit for this video has been D&D Hellboy.
My Data Over Dogma V-neck tee.
Hey everybody, my name's Dan McClellan. I'm a scholar of the Bible and religion. I did my doctoral dissertation at the University of Exeter, where I wrote on cognitive science of religion and cognitive linguistics and the conceptualization of deity in the Hebrew Bible, and I have a new book coming out shortly called The Bible Says So, where we get right and wrong about Scripture's most controversial issues.
Okay, I just want to say personally that I've been a huge fan of Dan for a long time, and getting the chance to speak with him on this project was truly amazing. If you have any doubts or questions about anything at all in the Christian Bible, Dan's the man. Literally, he was the first person I thought of when we started working on this. Okay, we're not fangirling. Let's get to the root of the matter. If you want to understand why religious groups behave the way they do, you have to understand what their sacred books, in this case the Bible, tells them to do, right? Well, it's not that simple.
That's something I always point out. There's no such thing as the Bible, just like there's no such thing as the dictionary. There are Bibles, there are dictionaries. None has any inherent authority over any other, and there are all kinds of different canons. It's a debate that's never really going to go away, and I don't think anybody really can win that debate. It's really just a matter of trying to convince the in-group that we have it right and everybody else has it wrong.
You see, the Bible was composed over the course of more than a millennium by a wide variety of people writing for a wide variety of different purposes. It's unlikely that any single author had any idea they were contributing to a larger collection that would one day be thought of as a single coherent body of work, least of all one that people would be citing as a source of divine authority 2 or even 3,000 years later. And on top of all of that, it has been translated over and over, so its meaning is subtly morphing over time. Different sects of different religious communities, Jews, Christians, and Muslims, and even within these religions, have different beliefs regarding which sections are sacred and what they mean. Perhaps you're familiar with this Bible passage.
Jesus says it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter heaven. And people try to reinterpret this in a variety of different ways. There are some folks who say that, oh, the eye of the needle was this nickname for these special doors that were on the larger city gates that you would open to just let an individual through. But a camel, if it wanted to go through, would have to be stripped of all of its accoutrement, and it would have to crawl through on its knees. And not only is that just laughably stupid, like nobody's going to be like, oh, we're not going to take the extra 90 seconds to open the gate, so take everything off your camel and take an extra 10 minutes for the camel to then crawl through on its knees, and then you carry all the crap through, and then you put it back. Like, And those are called wicket gates, but they originate in like late antique medieval Europe. There is no evidence at all that any such gates ever existed in, near, or around Jerusalem in the 1st century CE. So it's definitely not referring to that. And then there are folks who will say, well, the Aramaic word that gets translated here as camel is very, very close to the word for rope. And so maybe it just means rope. But we have early Jewish texts that use that hyperbole, which talk about impossible things being comparable to either an elephant or a camel passing through the eye of a needle. So we know this was an idiom at the time. And the idea is basically not happening. But there is kind of a relief valve at the very end when the disciples say, who then can be saved? And Jesus says, well, with men, this is impossible, but with God, all things are possible. So it's not saying if you're rich, you're definitely not going to be saved, but it is certainly saying you better watch yourself if you're rich, because it's not an easy thing to do. And we see elsewhere in the Gospels, Jesus routinely saying things like, or where your treasure is, there will be your heart also. And you cannot serve God and wealth. Cannot serve two masters, because you will love one and hate the other.
So using the Bible itself is still not clear, but there's an even bigger issue with using the Bible as a justification for any moral decision, and that's the fact that we negotiate with the text all the time.
In Proverbs, it says that it's good to beat your kids. And I see a lot of folks on social media who will try to negotiate with that and say, oh, the staff there isn't a staff of discipline. This is a shepherd's staff. This is used to gently guide sheep. That's how we should understand this. And while I think that's a great reading that can help us understand it in a different way, it's definitely not what the author intended. The author very clearly intended to say it's okay to beat your kids. In fact, you need to beat your kids. And that's bad. I think it would be much better to say this was written in a time period when they thought that beating children was helpful. It's not. It's phenomenally harmful. It's bad. It's stupid. Don't do it.
Now, there is plenty of wisdom to be found in the Bible. Trust me, I grew up learning all the Bible stories, and some of them had great lessons. But you don't have to look very hard to find some outlandish and even offensive content. Meaning, in practice, almost everyone who claims the Bible as the ultimate authority on doing everything is definitely doing a lot of cherry picking.
We've totally rejected slavery. Like, that's unilaterally condoned throughout the Bible, but we've decided we know better. And I think we're right. We've entirely rejected the prohibition on charging interest on usury. That was something that lasted for a long time within early Christianity. That was considered robbery, to charge interest on loans and things like that. And we decided, you know what? We're done with this. We're just going to overrule the Bible on this one. So every part of the Bible is negotiable. We've already negotiated a lot of it away.
And yet, many people in prominent positions of power, both inside and outside of the church, still claim the Bible as life's one and only instruction manual. Why?
Now, a lot of people talk as if their worldview comes downstream from the Bible, and that's precisely what Speaker Johnson said when he first got the position. Said, you know, some people in the media asked me, what's my worldview? What's my stance on this, that, and the other? And I told them, read your Bible, that's my worldview. And that's laughably stupid, because it's obviously not true. That's an attempt to try to say the worldview I have comes from the Bible. And the reality is the worldview you have comes from your intuitions, and then you go out and look for a way to rationalize it and make it sound rational or inviolable or something like that. And so you go to the Bible and you find what you want in the Bible to make your intuitive positions feel biblical. It's the same reason that people will give arguments for why, you know, they would vote for a laughably stupid rapist who lies about everything and can barely read. It's because the data are not what result in their position. Their position is more intuitive and overwhelmingly is going to be based on identity politics. Whatever social identities are important to them, their needs, their interests are going to take priority, and then the argument, the rationalization is secondary.
The reality is this: it's far less about what the Bible actually says and far more about the almost mystical power that it and other religious texts play in our society.
I think the Bible is a way to gin up an authority that is above reproach and that is beyond question. Because if it is inspired, if it is univocal, if it is inerrant, all those things, then there can be no higher authority. And so the one who wields the Bible wields the ultimate authority. It is the grand trump card. And so I think because of that, it becomes a phenomenally attractive backup. It becomes the thing you want to have in your back pocket, and particularly for folks who see the evangelical Christian nationalist identity as an attractive one, as the one that's going to get me the access to power and resources that I want. The Bible is then your main weapon. That's what you want to have with you at all times. And it happens to be interpretively malleable and flexible. And because it can be interpreted in a variety of different ways, it can be leveraged in the service of all kinds of different circumstances.
The only reason why certain things in the Bible, or claim to be in the Bible, hold so much power is because belief in a higher power has such a grip on our society. Realizing that led us to our next question. Why is so much of humankind willing to rally around the idea of an all-powerful and benevolent God that no one has ever even seen? The short answer, blind religious faith might not be a choice. For many people, it's all but hardwired into our DNA.
If a stranger approached you on the street and offered you the promise of immortality, not in this life, but in the next, and in exchange, all you have to do is give him 20% of everything you earn until the day you die, what would you do? And yet, between tithing 10% of your income, offerings, donations, and seed sowing, that's pretty much the implicit, if not explicit, promise of many prosperity churches. Why does this only make sense within the confines of organized religion? To figure that out, I talked to a professor that studies the psychology of religion.
Pascal Boyer. I'm a professor of psychology and anthropology at Washington University in St. Louis. And what I've been doing for many years is study what you could call the psychology of religion, or more the way the human mind sort of shapes the religious traditions.
Why are humans so drawn to organized religion?
It's a preference for something that's been extraordinarily useful for our entire evolutionary history, which is to form groups of high solidarity. You know, we couldn't survive without that. And one aspect of that is that we can form groups that have rival interests, and then we sort of amp up the emotional appeal of being in the group and damaging the other group, and we immediately think of it in terms of zero sum. That is, if they lose, we win. If we lose, they win.
In other words, organized religions often have less to do with the religion and more to do with the organization itself.
So human groups depend on everyone's commitment. The extreme things are going to war together, or we are building something together. This is something that only works if lots of people do it. So lots of people are committed. Now, if I build a cult in which I ask you to agree to the fact that if we drop objects, they fall downwards, or that when there's tons of clouds, it's more likely to rain than when the sky is blue, all I know about you is that, yeah, you agreed with me. But everyone does anyway. So I don't know anything special about your commitment. How if I tell you that chairs can fly if you concentrate your gaze on them on a Tuesday afternoon in a particular sort of shrine and stuff like that? And you say, yes, I think that happens. Well, then you've shown me that you're prepared to agree to something just for the sake of being in my group. You're prepared to agree to something that not only shows that you're with me, but also shows to other people that you're not with them anymore, because you have a belief that's shocking in a way, that's irrational. The more bizarre, the better in a way, because it shows that you really are committed.
It's like with LGBTQ+ issues. For all the controversy the topic generates today, same-sex relations weren't even important enough to make it into something like the Ten Commandments. Take a second to think about that. The foundational moral code of Christianity, and not a single mention. Meanwhile, sins like adultery or collecting interest on loans, which were explicitly condemned in the Bible, barely spark the same outrage. So why are so many Christians today more obsessed with controlling sexuality than confronting the actual sins that their scripture condemns? Religious scholar Dan agrees with Professor Pascal here that it's less about scripture and more about identity markers.
It is a useful identity marker for an awful lot of folks. It is a useful way to say, this is where I stand. If you want to be part of the in-group, you need to endorse this as well. And so it becomes kind of a rally cry for the in-group. It functions more as an identity marker than anything else. And I think one day, I probably won't live to see it. One day, though, I think we will reach a critical mass of people who have realized that the well-being and the very lives of men, women, and children around the world are more important than the rhetorical utility of this identity marker of homophobia, of opposition to LGBTQIA identities. It's just a matter of how long it takes before people come to that realization. And I don't think I will live to see it, but I think we'll get there one day.
It's not hard to understand why people are drawn to and maybe even need to believe in a higher power. As the old saying goes, there are no atheists in a foxhole. We would all prefer to believe that life isn't just random and meaningless, and that when we die, our consciousness doesn't simply blow out like a candle. Religion is the only alternative we have to facing that endless eternal void. But that only explains the drive impulse towards faith. It doesn't explain why religion is so often and so easily weaponized toward terrible things, whether that's robbing your members of their money, or far worse, being used to justify atrocities like slavery and genocide. Cynics have sometimes argued that religion is inherently evil, but I think that's an oversimplification. I grew up a Christian and I can tell you that it did teach me a lot about how to be a good person. Things like love your neighbor as yourself and do to others as you would have them do to you are principles that can help you live a life filled with genuine love, compassion, tolerance, and happiness. In fact, in its earliest days, Christianity was an exceptional model of what a spiritual organization should be. Early Christians lived simply and communally. They shared everything they had with each other, and their churches were simply the homes of the members. Taking their cue from Jesus, who preached not vengeance on conquest, but instead even forgave his own murderers while hanging on the cross, disciples traveled widely, spreading peaceful and practical teachings like everything I was taught in Sunday school. But then, something changed.
The tables turn once you are on the other side of those systemic power asymmetries. And when you are leveraging identity politics over and against the less powerful groups, the minoritized, the marginalized, the oppressed groups, you're on the offensive and you have the power, then I think it becomes a phenomenally harmful thing. And I think Christianity, that pivot kind of happened around the 4th century when Christianity took over the Roman Empire, and has been one of the major players in the global geopolitical scene ever since.
350 years after Jesus' death, Emperor Theodosius made Christianity the official religion of Rome, and within just 10 years, worshipping pagan gods became a crime. You would have expected a former minority group who were persecuted for worshipping their god to understand the values of acceptance and tolerance. Instead, the once persecuted instantly became the persecutors themselves. To make sense of some of the more regrettable excesses in church history, Noah spoke to someone on the inside.
Although there are many influencers among the Christian clergy these days, not surprisingly, very few seem excited to discuss the darker chapters in church history with us on camera. Luckily for us, there was one exception.
My name is Father Leo Padalinghug. I'm a Catholic priest who also is a professional chef. I host and founded an international faith and food movement called Plating Grace, movement to bring families back around the dinner table.
When we asked him about the church's dark history, here's what he had to say.
And let's go through point by point. And I've done that with people, and they now start to see the Crusades. They're not terrible. The witch hunts, for sure, come across very badly. But if you look at the history, there was kind of a reason for why we wanted to expel diviners and other people who claimed to be witches. It was a weird time. Theological precision was a very big thing during the time of the Inquisition. Heresies were thought of as things of the past, but no, they were creeping up again and trying to maintain kind of a unity among Christians was a reason for the Inquisition. Now, were there extreme measures? Of course, and they were terrible. I mean, it's kind of inexcusable. But sadly, that is an antiquated part of history. They acted in the manner of their time, and it was terrible. Thankfully, Christianity has evolved, learned from it, and said, we can't do that anymore.
But then my question is, If we can look back now and admit that so many atrocities committed in the name of the Lord are evil, albeit a product of their time, then why can't we do the same today? Why can't we look around at all the hate, bigotry, and economic exploitation being carried out under the same sacred banners and simply admit that it's wrong? Must we always wait for the next generation to do what we should have done ourselves? I'm sure there were people back then, good, courageous people, who spoke out when Christians were burning innocent women at the stake. People who were shouted down, told that the Bible says, "Suffer not a witch to live," so it was justified. Isn't this the same thing we're doing to people who talk about issues within the church today?
As the age of empires arrived, Europe effectively exported their repackaged Christian values to the rest of the world, often with brutal consequences. This is how they convince themselves of the morality of colonization. Nobody wants to think of themselves as the bad guy. Unlike ancient empires like Rome, who conquered solely for profit and power, Christianity gave Europe a noble-sounding justification for plundering and destroying any civilization they encountered on foreign shores. Take the colonial efforts of Spain in what is now known as Latin America. Their mission to spread the word of God was no doubt sincere. In fact, till today, the region is still a stronghold of devout Christianity. But the main headline here is the wholesale destruction of nearly everything the Spaniards came in contact with. Less than 200 years after Christopher Columbus arrived, the population of modern-day Mexico was reduced from 25 million to 1 million. Slavery and forced labor were rampant and implemented openly. A contemporary account held that slave ship captains navigate without the need of compass or charts, following instead the trail of floating corpses tossed overboard by the ship before them. And all of this was done in the name of an evangelizing mission to introduce a heathen people to the one true God. This total destruction of native populations created the need for a new supply of human labor. And with that, the enslavement of Africans in the New World began. Slaveholders in the Americas again felt a responsibility to save the souls of the godless primitives. And in a cruel twist of irony, the message of Christianity that the meek shall inherit the earth was tailor-made to serve as a tool of suppression. Because it is much easier for a person to remain in oppression when they've been convinced that in doing so, their reward in heaven will be far greater. How does the church make sense of this?
I kind of attribute it to 3 reasons. One, because the church is made up of humans, and obviously humans are very flawed individuals. And while there are very good people, there are also very bad people. The fact that Judas was part of the 12, I mean, it's very easy to be corrupted because of power, wealth, influence, whatever you want to think is good and noble, but really the exact opposite. The second thing is that whenever many people come together, so first, individually, people are messed up, then you bring them together. And then now you have a collection of good people and a collection of bad apples and bad players. And that gets organized. So you're going to always see, the scriptures are clear, weeds and wheat. And some bad people had very good intentions, but they were just a little too broken to see that their decisions or their influence could have deleterious effects. The third reason is because there are forces that want to destroy the good of the Catholic Church, namely the presence of Satan, evil, the demonic. We forget that we are mystical beings, and we have to fight against evil spirits, which wants to destroy the church, which corrupts individuals and communities.
Whether or not you agree with a father's third point, his first and second are definitely right. None of this is to single out Christianity. Indeed, the Aztec Empire, whose culture the Spaniards all but entirely erased, themselves practiced mass human sacrifices in which priests removed the still beating hearts of children. And then there's also the extremely checkered history of Muslim expansion. As is the case with Jesus, there's no clear and indisputable proof that the Prophet Muhammad himself ever expressed any interest whatsoever in spreading his message far and wide, much less forcefully compelling non-believers to accept it or else. And yet, the spread of Islam into places like India was every bit as bloody as Christian colonialism. Muslim expansion into India alone saw a successful conversion of millions, but claimed millions of innocent lives as well, often by use of exotic and especially brutal methods. Contemporary accounts tell us that every Muslim invader worth his salt amassed a literal tower of human souls. Fittingly, the violent worlds of evangelical Christians and Muslim worlds eventually collided in brutal fashion during the Crusades. Unfortunately, of course, religious conflicts of this nature continue into the present day. Although the scale of atrocities might have lessened, bloody disputes over control of sites considered sacred by Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike continue today in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Then, as now, it remains devilishly difficult to define which side God really is rooting for. For many people, the very word religion summons images of division, conflict, and needless suffering, which is unfortunate because in many ways, which are easy to overlook, religion has often lived up to its promise.
Libraries were organized because of the Catholic faith. Hospitals, the education system. I mean, just taking critical thinking from the Greek philosophers and bringing it into kind of a systematic philosophy. These are things that the Catholic Church created. We're the largest charitable institution in all of world history. We have not only fed more people, but we've actually provided care for all. We've stood up for social causes, whether it be the environment or human rights, and particularly human life.
For all the damage and devastation the European world brought to Africa, Christian missionaries like Mary Slessor in Nigeria helped eradicate long-standing traditions of child sacrifice, which was a feature of pre-colonial African religions. Once again, a terrible and very real cost for the lowest of society, all to serve the imagined needs of an unforeseen God, an absent God. Meanwhile, the spread of Islam also brought critical contributions to human society. While pre-Enlightenment Christian West was busy stamping out intellectual and scientific progress, Muslim Arabs, on the other hand, both preserved and even furthered knowledge of science, mathematics, and medicine. However, the rise of radical Islam has led to the suppression of women's rights and intolerance in general. One thing I'll give the Catholic Church specifically though, is that it has undoubtedly taken steps to put its house in order, especially thanks to the late Pope Francis, God rest his soul. He had a refreshingly frank and progressive worldview. However, as the Catholic Church has attempted to put the warts of its past behind it, others have devised ways to harness the power of the Christian faith and the Christian community in ways that would have been impossible to predict even just a few years ago.
In 16th and 17th century Europe, the idea that certain monarchs ruled by divine right started to take hold. The notion that kings were handpicked by a society's resident deity is far older, of course. You can find it in ancient Hindu texts and in the god kings of ancient Egypt, where pharaohs were worshipped as living deities. As Christianity rose to dominate Europe, so too did this belief that royal bloodlines were chosen by God himself. Well, there was no proof. There could be no proof. But once the claim was established, disagreeing with a monarch or even questioning them became equivalent to challenging God himself. Religion's power was no longer just about salvation. It was rerouted and weaponized to serve the interests of the powerful few over the powerless many. Although no American president has ever been bold enough to claim themselves as God's anointed,
I am the chosen one.
Well, not directly, anyway. Christian nationalism, the idea that Christian ideals are superior and ought to drive a nation's politics, is evidently on the rise, both in the US and elsewhere. Although one of the bedrock features of America's foundation is having no official state religion, many prominent Republican politicians, like current Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, now openly cite the Bible as the be-all and end-all of their own personal and political beliefs.
Someone asked me today in the media, they said, it's curious, people are curious, what does Mike Johnson think about any issue under the sun? I said, well, go pick up a Bible off your shelf and read it. That's my worldview.
You know, I want to always separate what people have done with faith politically. You know, in America, we call it Christian nationalism. And I struggle with that because that's a term that I wouldn't use to describe myself. I'm a Christian, but I'm also patriotic. I came to this country as an immigrant. But my faith has nothing to do with politics. It has everything to do with just being able to respect what I believe.
You might assume the Bible itself argues for the rule of Christian law on earth, but in Dan McClellan's view, it has little or no basis in Scripture.
I don't think there's a legitimate biblical argument to make for Christian nationalism. I think there is an argument to make, but it's a pathetic and a laughably stupid one, unfortunately. Christianity, I think, frequently tries to cast itself as the victim because that's how it finds itself in a lot of these biblical texts. And particularly, I'm thinking of Revelation, where the big bad Roman Empire is oppressing the plucky little band of Christ followers. And so because the end times are supposed to be this story of the little guy, the David against the Goliath, the demonic forces of evil. But we're the Roman Empire now. And so we've got to find oppressors. But we don't have any. If you look around, we don't really have oppressors. We have the victims of our own oppression, and that's who's being identified by Christian nationalists as the oppressors. They talk about, again, LGBTQIA communities are primary among them, but immigrants, you know, we've now developed a concept of race as a question of skin color, and so non-white folks get to be in that as well. And, you know, white cis hetero males are the most powerful group in the nation, but we try to pretend that we've been victimized by everybody out there that we're just stomping all over. And so I think there are ways to leverage parts of the Bible to defend that and to validate that. But I think it's being done in insincere and harmful ways. If we leverage Revelation and try to say trans women are possessed by Satan and they're going to try to destroy Western civilization and all this, it's trying to cast a tiny minority of folks who are overwhelmingly vulnerable and oppressed as the big bad empire that's coming to get us, and we need to protect ourselves. And so that's just phenomenally insincere. So
Christian nationalism always frames the world in a stark existential terms, us against them. And in societies where inequality is rising, where financial safety nets are collapsing and the rich are getting richer faster than ever before, a dangerous reality begins to set in, that there isn't enough to go around. In that kind of world, it becomes crucial to align yourself with the winning team. I believe this is the real story behind the graph I showed at the start of this video. When the few who hold the wealth claim it as their godly inheritance, it's hard to convince the poor otherwise, especially when they can see with their own two eyes that no amount of effort will ever lift them to the same heights. What they mistake for God's favor, however, it's not divine blessing at all. It's late-stage capitalism doing exactly what it was designed to do. When there seems to be no way to make it in a world filled with inequality, it becomes even more tempting for people to put their faith in a magical, all-powerful entity, one that's associated with prosperity, in the hopes that he will include you in the chosen ones to be saved if only you give him 10% of your income. It's the same reason most people who play the lottery are poor. The belief that God will step in and take care of you isn't no different from buying a lottery ticket. If you don't have conventional ways to build wealth, if the system is already rigged against you, the odds may be long, astronomical even, but for many, it's the only shot they have to escape absolute poverty.
For example, Latin America used to be completely a sort of Catholic place where, you know, traditional Catholicism was the sort of standard religion. And it's turning more and more towards forms of evangelical Protestantism, many of which have this prosperity kind of perspective, who say you can do things and it depends on you and it's about you and it will get better. And by it getting better, you will show that God, you know, has a special sort of, affection for you.
It is a well-established fact that as countries move up the socio-economic ladder, the rates of religious practice drops accordingly. In the US, for example, in the 1990s, around 90% of the population identified as Christians. But that number was on a steady decline until recently, when you guessed it, the income inequality started to increase drastically. Now there are all of these mega churches and giga churches packed to the gills with thousands of attendees every single weekend. To say nothing of all the preachers collecting their donations to the tunes of tens and even hundreds of millions of dollars. You even have young Jersey men turning back to Christianity. but not the one of the Bible that teaches you to be meek and says the rich should give up everything they have to follow Jesus. No. These are entrepreneurs who talk about how Jesus teaches you to be hardworking and how God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills and has given it to them for an inheritance. They are, you could say, the children of the Christian nationalist megachurch prosperity gospel mindset. For the first time in recent history, Christians can be part of the cool crowd, and no one pulled off the cool crowd quite like Hillsong.
My name is Noemi Uribe, and I was a former Hillsong member and leader.
Noemi Uribe grew up in the church. You might say it's the family business.
So I grew up in a apostolic Pentecostal church, very strict, very conservative, predominantly Latino church, and my dad was clergy within. He was associate pastor, and then he ended up being somewhat of like a missionary within the church in Mexico. So he had exposure to a lot of the politics that happens within a church. And that in turn, I had it as well. And all of my uncles as well were a part of the church. And they were second generation because my grandpa had been a part of it. So it was a big family thing that people pass on. And now I have cousins who are becoming pastors and leaders in the church. So it's kind of the generational thing once you're in it. And so I was expected to go on that path.
Upon moving to a new town where they didn't know anyone, Noemi quickly found an adoptive family in Hillsong.
I joined Hillsong Boston in 2017 when I came to Boston. I moved here for graduate school. They were trying to get volunteers to be a part of it, so I was able to help build it up. And I was a part of Hillsong until December of 2019, and it was an interesting experience to say the least.
Looking back, Noemi says there were some early warning signs.
The first time I went to a volunteers night, and this is important because it really informs how I navigated my own experience. Josh Kimes, who was the pastor of Boston, told the new volunteers sitting there, I'm not going to have the time to be pastoring you. You need to find things that are fulfilling for you spiritually so that when you come on Sundays, you're ready to serve people. And that for me was interesting, having been a pastor's kid, seeing the preparation that went behind it to serve people. And so the fact that he's telling now the volunteers that you need to pastor yourself didn't make any sense in so many ways. As a pastor not pastoring is weird.
But even worse was the way they found themselves and other volunteers being treated.
I think they just saw us as worker ants. And so it was a constant after service of oh my, okay, how many times is Josh going to yell at us? What is he going to say? How is he going to do it?
Noemi sees the source of this behavior going all the way up to the founder of Hillsong.
I think it definitely stems from the top and the attitude of Brian Houston. And people who I know have served Brian Houston, either their coffee or in the green rooms or doing different things, will say that he's not a good person or he's not nice, that he sees their volunteers as a worker ant who is not deserving of words or to be looked at,
For Noemi, the breaking point came when they went to Hillsong leaders to work through emerging questions about their sexual orientation.
You had to really dig deep to find a situation that happened in 2015 with another volunteer in New York who was a choir director and who was, people knew that he was gay, and when he finally announced that he was engaged and getting married to his partner, they ended up asking him to step down and was no longer allowed to be a part of the choir. I ended up having to dig that out and was then asking, okay, why did this happen? What is the actual theology behind it? And they would always just say, it's a case-by-case basis. And so that made it really weird, and it gave me more questions and answers.
Eventually, the situation spiraled.
My family was far away, and the people who were there near me were also pushing me away. So it took me down a very dark path. And in June of 2019, I ended up having to admit myself to a psychiatric hospital because I needed that, because suicide ideation was so high. And the only people who were able to distinguish that and say something else professionally is needed here were my friends outside of the church. And that really led me to realize that if I didn't have my friend and outside support to go to a hospital, and I continued with what Hillsong was offering, I would not be here today.
In Noemi's opinion, Hillsong, like many other religious organizations, likely started off with noble intentions before eventually becoming corrupted.
From the history that I've learned from Hillsong is that Brian Houston, before he started and developed a place like Hillsong to be what it became, was a very community-centered church where people were volunteering. Everything was very different in Australia until he traveled to the US and met televangelists and people who were doing this kind of church very differently with a perspective of capitalism behind it, of getting money out of it. And so when he returns to Australia, he brings this new perspective, and then everything shifts and people start to have this exploitation because we're trying to grow so we can get more money and write more books and do all of this merch and these music. So then you start to see the shift of where it happens there.
By the time the Hillsong empire began to collapse, Noemi was already gone. The dominoes fell quickly. Hillsong's founder, Brian Houston, resigned, not over one scandal, but two. First, accusations of sexual impropriety of his own, and second, allegations that he helped to cover up credible claims of child sexual abuse committed by his own father. In New Jersey, a Hillsong pastor stepped down after allegedly sending a sexually explicit photo to a volunteer. But the poster child for Hillsong's meteoric rise and catastrophic fall was celebrity preacher Carl Lentz, who took to Instagram to confess his infidelity to his wife in front of the world that once worshipped him. Hillsong, as it currently stands, may be a shadow of its former self. But it is already hard at work reinventing. In fact, a member of our team went to Los Angeles to take a look for ourselves.
So for the next step of our investigation, we decided to see what does Hillsong look like post-scandal, at least here in Los Angeles. So that's what I did. A couple weekends ago on a Sunday morning, I drove out to, it wasn't a nightclub, it wasn't their own dedicated space. They're having services, at least at the moment, in the auditorium of a Los Angeles high school. First thing I noticed when I pulled into the parking lot is there were a lot of very, very nice, very expensive cars there. And as I got out of my much less nice car, honestly, I was feeling nervous. On one hand, Noemi had told us to expect greeters at the door and that I was going to get love bombed and, was I walking into some kind of cult that it was going to be hard for me to walk out of? And on the other hand, I was having these paranoid thoughts. We reached out to the leadership, the current leadership of Hillsong Los Angeles, to see if they would talk to us on camera for this project. We didn't hear back, but were they going to somehow recognize me? Was I going to end up in some weird interrogation room? But obviously nothing of that sort happened. A couple greeters at the door did say good morning to me. I walked past a bunch of people. It was a good-looking crowd, a very stylish crowd, but it was also a very noticeably diverse crowd. It was multi-ethnic, it was multi-generational, and I went inside and I had a seat, and before too long, the lights went down and the performance began. And that's what it is. It's a performance. It's a concert. It's professional sound, professional lighting, musically, not my cup of tea. If you like that whole Mumford & Sons stomp, clap, hey kind of thing, maybe you'd like it more than I do. But I'm not trying to make fun of it. I grew up in a Catholic church. The music was so painfully boring. I did appreciate that they were trying to make the music fun and energetic to engage people spiritually. Like they said at one point, is it okay if we do a new song? And everybody in the crowd went crazy. And I realized I went to Catholic church for 20 years. I don't think they ever played one new song once. So I have no doubt that there were a lot of people there who were showing up because they wanted to have a genuine spiritual experience on a Sunday morning, and I feel like that's what a lot of those people were getting. And I was only there for 20 or 30 minutes. There was this other side that I could definitely see. Before it started, there was a guy walking around the outside of the rows of chairs saying stuff like, "Are you ready to get your praise on?" Which maybe that appeals to you, different strokes. It struck me as a little bit silly. And I also couldn't help but noticing the second the band came out, the second the music started, a bunch of people, it seemed like they flipped a switch, especially the front row, like the Hillsong mosh pit. they're jumping and they're clapping and they're hugging each other. And maybe I'm just being cynical, but you can't help but wonder. It felt performative. Like how much of this was sincere and how much of this were they doing to make a show for other people and maybe also for themselves. And then the preacher came out after 3 very long songs, very stylish, terrific haircut. And he immediately launched into, if this is your first time here, let me tell you what we're all about. And the first thing he said is something like, we believe that God is present in this room. And, that's fine. That's pretty typical of a religious gathering. But then he went one step further and he said, and this is pretty much a direct quote, we believe in the supernatural healing of the sick. And then he went further than that, and they pulled up this big wall behind him with a graphic of all the miracles that all the people in the room were praying for. This person wants a job. This person's looking for love. And it struck me that the whole vibe of this thing was very modern and stylish and cool and was much more similar to what you might find in popular entertainment. But at its core, it wasn't all that different from what you'd find in like a prosperity Bible megachurch. The prosperity gospel preaches that if you believe hard enough and you pray hard enough, you can get rich. And it just seemed like Hillsong was saying that if you believe hard enough and sing along hard enough to the songs that we play, that we can petition God to make miracles, like make wishes come true. And at that point, I felt like I got the idea. I felt like I'd had enough, so I kind of snuck out the back. I took with me, it was a couple weeks before Easter. They had an Easter egg, and they said they were going to be dropping Easter eggs with candy for the kids from a helicopter on Easter. So I had one of those on my chair, and needless to say, I also had one of these collection envelopes.
Hillsong Los Angeles may or may not be able to deliver the miracles the leaders profess to believe in. But putting supernatural elements aside, now that the community has been humbly reduced from its former glory, ironically, it might stand a better chance of actually resembling what Jesus actually envisioned for his community of believers.
I think ultimately the design of it wasn't to be big. Jesus was calling for people to have like house churches and smaller spaces where community could be created, where everyone put money into a pot and everyone's needs were met through that. And so then if you grow a space to be so big where no one knows each other's names or knows the random person that comes in through your door, then how are you actually building community and humanizing people?
Organized religion has offered and continues to offer real, tangible benefits to believers all around the world. And countless religious leaders no doubt embody the very best virtues their faiths have to offer. I lost my dad at 8 years old, and the pastor of my church took me in and took care of my brother and I. Some of the best people I've ever met are Christians. But when the final accounting is made, are we certain that the positives truly outweigh the negatives both past and present? You could make the case easily that religion, even more than guns and bombs, has been the single most destructive force in human history. So, what might the world look like if it never existed at all? Most major societies throughout history have developed dominant religious systems that became deeply tied to their politics and culture. China is possibly the only one major exception. Throughout its history, not just under communism, China has largely been non-religious. Confucianism, Taoism, and later Buddhism shaped Chinese life, but these were more worldviews than rigid religions. They didn't impose the strict hierarchies or dogmatic rules that organized religions elsewhere often did. In fact, a century before Christopher Columbus set sail, China had the most advanced naval power in the world, far beyond anything Europe could imagine at the time. Yet China chose to turn inwards. Confucian scholars urged that chasing power and wealth overseas would lead to corruption and ruin, a sharp contrast to Europe's later obsession with conquest and empire fueled by religious destiny. Even without a mandate to spread faith by force, China still isn't without sin. Perhaps at the end of the day, whether in the name of God's glory or a nation's glory or simply an individual's glory, the innate human desire to assert power and accumulate wealth is bound to rear its ugly head in one form or another. The challenge though is that we can all come together and criticize openly when it's the latter too. Yet when it's done in the name of God, it becomes a lot more difficult to talk about. Once somebody says or does anything in the name of their God or their religion, arguments to the contrary on the basis of fairness or reason go out the window, because religion of its very nature is irrational. There is no counter-argument to because God said so. And when the message I believe I'm getting from my God conflicts with the message you're getting from your God, there's really no way we can ever settle. Throughout history, many observers have pointed out that people who act in the name of religion frequently do not even act in a manner that is consistent with how their religion's founders carried themselves while alive. To put it simply, Christians, Muslims, and Buddhists may not agree on much, but ironically, Christ, Muhammad, and Buddha probably would. Putting aside questions of the afterlife, in the here and now, in the world as we know it, if you approach life with an open heart and a sincere desire to improve yourself and the world around you, it probably doesn't matter much which religion you decide to follow, or whether you follow any at all. But this assumes that your goal is enlightenment, and sadly, that does not seem to be the actual aim of most of the world's religious. Too often, rather than helping effect real change, religion prevents people from taking practical action to make the world a better place, either by dividing us into opposing camps to fight one another, or by pushing doomsday propaganda which makes taking small but practical steps towards improving life in the here and now seem futile in comparison. Religion should be an aid to kindness, open-mindedness, and compassion, to working towards social justice and improving living standards for all. Instead, more often acts as an obstacle. As easy as it is to embrace cynicism, it's worth remembering that the world is a far, far more tolerant place than it was even 1,000 or even 100 years ago.
You know, I worked with a group called Chefs for Peace, Christian Jews and Muslims. We used to cook in kitchens together with really sharp knives, you know, in a very small kitchen. And we never did any damage to each other because we realized that if you believe in the one true God, the book of Isaiah says you will turn spears into plowshares, swords into pruning hooks. But I think we can all realize that the world is a very big place. There are going to be many people who believe different things. Can we live together and, you know, the bumper sticker coexist? Can we coexist and yet still have dialogue with each other in a peaceful way? It's not an easy thing.
And sadly, we still have a long way to go. Luckily, the Christian drive to convert the world has died off. And in the modern world, it doesn't always end well for the people who try. The extreme world of radical Islam, however, is still in desperate need of the kind of reform and modernization which will allow equal rights for women and anyone else who doesn't adhere to their own strict interpretation of God's will. The more things change, the more they stay the same. On any given weekend, megachurches will still be packing them in, and prosperity preachers and other assorted religious conmen will be spreading a faith Jesus himself would not even recognize. Our political leaders will continue to assure us they lead with our Heavenly Father's blessing, and religious leaders will line up to signal, as shepherds to their flocks, that they co-sign these claims.
Time and again, across the centuries, over millennia, God's name is invoked to serve the ambitious of the powerful, to grow their wealth, to expand their empires, to tighten their grip on the world. And time and again, it's ordinary people like you and me who pay the ultimate price, caught in the crossfire, left to bear the wounds.